Right.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
وعليكم السلام. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل له فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. ما بعد، أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Rabbi zidni ilma. Ameen. All right,
Amen.
Brother Islam, we're back. Last week was, we were
Tanakh
here
stream.
last week, the Tanakh stream, right?
Yeah.
So we're
The
back after a couple of weeks. Yeah. So welcome to all of our audiences. We've got about 12 viewers who've joined us. Inshallah, this number will grow. I know Brother Subur is also streaming today
Ah,
on
okay.
some evidences on the um, that basically go refute the idea that Darwinian evolution is true. Right?
We should bring him on for a discussion.
Yes, that would actually be fun. Are you in touch with him, or do you want me to
Yeah,
get in touch?
alhamdulillah. I'm in touch with him.
Okay.
Are you in touch with him?
I have his contact. I've met with him on there, but I have never actually had a conversation with him because, firstly, because of proximity, but the other reason being that we've not. His field is very special.
Mm.
Subhanallah. He's very knowledgeable in his field. I don't think there's any other brother in the Dawah field as knowledgeable as him. Maybe Kaisar Ahmad Raja on the Urdu channels. He's got a lot of knowledge about this particular field. But Subhanallah, yes, Brother Sabur is
I think he's got quite good
unique.
knowledge in other fields. This is just the one that he's been driving home.
Yes, Subhanallah. Yeah, this field especially he's very knowledgeable on evolution, Darwinian evolution, and modern synthesis. So, um, do you want to just jump right into our videos, or do you have
Yeah, let's do
something
it.
that you want to discuss?
Let's bring him up and sort of
All right.
introduce friends.
So, Subhanallah. So we'll go over some refutations by an atheist of the proofs of God existence, an argument made by not a Muslim but essentially a Christian, and we'll discuss it from Islamic lens. Those same arguments, how as a Muslim you would present it, and we'll also see and talk and refute the refutations essentially. So that's gonna be an interesting video. So let's bring this up full screen. All right. Okay.
Well, just a quick prefix. We won't necessarily refute the refutations because the arguments aren't put forward very well, and
Yes.
a lot of the refutations of them are quite legitimate.
So pretty much a straw man of what the real argument should be essentially.
Well, I don't know if this guy is oversimplifying or just has a simple view, but obviously it's so. I mean, the one presenting in the blue t-shirt, or sorry, the blue shirt. The arguments he gives aren't great, but you know that they're structured very simply. I don't know if that's just for the sake of his audience or if that's his sort of level of philosophy.
Yeah.
And the guy Rationality Rules, the guy Stephen Woodford, Woodwood, I think it is Woodwood or Woodford. It's very interesting. I watch quite a lot of his videos. I find him quite likable in many ways because he reminds me of a lot of my the friends I grew up with and so on. But there's also the quality of his rational or philosophical analysis varies wildly. Sometimes it's really good, and sometimes it's just awful and even bordering on deceitful. But I don't think he does it intentionally. He's not like the Deconstruction Zone guy who is just pure evil. You know, this is a guy I've got some time for. I'd like to talk to at some point, inshallah.
All right, let's go ahead then. Let's take a look.
Oh, I don't hear what he's saying. I haven't got the audio.
Okay, let me try again. Uh,
Maybe you forgot to say.
that's weird. Bismillah. Let me try again. Bismillah. It's a good reminder. Let's do this. Third time's the charm. Okay, let me know if you hear.
Socrates once stated that we should follow the argument wherever it leads.
You got it? Okay, perfect.
Yep.
So that's gonna be it. Let me change the setting. All right, perfect. Let's go ahead.
When we look at the most profound question of life, does God exist? We should certainly follow his advice. When we do, we'll find evidences that show us God is real. Let's look at 6 proofs that show God exists.
Why, hello, my fellow weeps. I'm Stephen Woodford, and as Kyle Butt of World Video Bible School just stated, we are today digesting 6 proofs of God's existence. Now, you might be thinking, what God? Vishnu, Odin, Osiris? I mean, different people in different parts of the world and at different times believed in all sorts of gods. And that's a great question that you'll find comfortably swept under Kyle's carpet. Hence, we have to proceed with a very vague notion of God. Shall we?
Number 1, the universe.
Before we even continue, this idea that what God that they bring up, do we have to identify this, or?
Well, it's I find this one kind of hilarious, because when people want to say atheism is well defined, obviously it means against that monotheistic God. It becomes obvious. Oh, that one, the Abrahamic one. Because if you push them and say, well, what is in the definition of theist, then they struggle to come up with a definition of deity such that their atheism captures it all. Because remember, the A is a negation across the whole category. And we've discussed this before, where they can't put it in such a way where things like Julius Caesar, or being a deity that ascends to heaven after he dies, or pharaohs and emperors being deified, or the Islamic concept of people deifying themselves, all get adequately included in the definition. So when it suits them, oh, it's obvious, the monotheistic one that everyone's refers to. And then when it suits them, oh no, all of them are equally valid proposals.
Yeah. And this is very dishonest at times, because just by looking at the individual who's speaking, this is a Christian individual, you can already narrow it down to who it is. So asking this question, that which God, so a number of times when you ask an atheist, what God are you denying? The normal response that you would get it, what God do you believe in? Right? Explain that to me. Now, here's the thing. How can you deny something you're not even aware of? So this position automatically makes it a position from complete ignorance. You're denying something you're not, either you don't know, right? Or you're not willing to state what you know. So you're basically being deceptive in that sense. So it isn't a very good position to hold. No matter how
I don't think it's necessarily intentionally deceptive, because remember that the shaitan has just played absolute tricks and tied the atheist brain in knots, and so they don't see it as being problematic or dishonest. They see it as being just a different valid positions in different contexts, typically.
It's true. I'm not saying that they're intentionally being deceptive, but when you're having a discussion with someone who holds the opposing view, and you're telling them, when being asked a question, what is that theism that you're denying? What theism are you denying? Right? You should be able to elaborate somewhat on what it is, because if you don't know the theism, and you're just saying that whatever theism you believe in is the one that I'm denying, that doesn't make any sense. Even before the person has put the argument forward, you've refuted the argument.
and that's what makes this a bit of a sort of underhand jab, because you know, obviously the guy's Christian and he's talking about proofs for the Christian notion of God, and Stephen knows that very well, and Stephen knows the Christian notion of God very well, or at least he knows the biblical excerpts and certain, you know, positions, and not that he necessarily has an intrinsic understanding. So yeah, it was a bit of a sort of unnecessary underhand jab, I think. But it's interesting you said about, you know, how can you deny what you're not aware of? So Stephen did another video talking about or he did many about the Jordan Peterson debates, and someone asked him, do you deny such and such? I forget the name, but it was some I think Polynesian deity or something like that. And so it would be interesting to contrast you know, what he says in that analysis versus what he ends up saying regarding, you know, something denying something he's not aware of. Or
that's interesting. If you have that somewhere, then we can actually bring it up next time and we'll go over that, because the contrast actually gives us a good idea about how they're thinking. But that's very well. Let's move ahead. This is the first argument, right? The first proof.
Must have a cause. The most fundamental law of science is the law of cause and effect. And it says that for every material effect we see, there is a cause that came before it or was simultaneous to it, and that is greater than it.
I don't know about you, but when I first heard of this law of cause and effect, I had a case of the rock's eyebrow. And when Carl stated what the law is, I smelt what can only be described as divine excrement. If you copy-paste Carl's so-called most fundamental law of science,
the most fundamental law of science,
into Google, you'll find 8 results, 4 of which are mirrors of Carl's script, 3 are theists quoting Carl's video, and 1 is to an inaccessible site. Simply put, Carl conjured it out of nothing, just as he claims his God conjured the universe out of nothing. What's more, notice that the definition that Carl gives us is of classical causation plus some suspiciously convenient words.
And that is greater than it.
No, Carl. Even in classical physics, a mere pebble can cause a colossal avalanche. And funny enough, effects are overwhelmingly the result of a congregation of causes, not one. Oh, and don't think that you're adding the word material.
Material
slipped us by. I'd say good try, but it wasn't.
The universe is a material effect. So what caused the universe?
Yeah. So there's a few things to pick up on here. Now, it's interesting to me because it's naturalism that takes cause and effect as being a fundamental law. It's not actually really science per se that regards it as a law, because the Islamic sciences didn't regard it as a law. However, it is part of the definition that distinguishes scientific inquiry from other kinds of inquiry. It's not uniquely distinguishing, but the very act of scientific investigation means breaking the world apart in ways that you see it as causes and effects being related to each other. And that's why it'd be a category error to call it a law, because it's just part of what the defining characteristics of the activity. So yeah, I find that very interesting, especially when juxtaposed with what Stephen said, conjured it out of nothing. I mean, that's absurd, because he immediately follows it by saying it's a definition of classical causation. Well, how can it be classical causation and conjured out of nothing? Like, you know, that's a very, you know, so just because he's not giving a particular quote of it, and actually it's not that easy to find a good quote of exactly that encompasses, you know, the law of cause and effect, quote unquote, the law.
Isn't this almost axiomatic when you're doing science, that you take this as that if something has happened, there must be a cause for it? And that's why you're able to do science. That's what science is all about.
Well, yeah, but you see, you could kind of call it axiomatic because of what I said before. It's part of what doing science means. Doing science means look at the relationships and the patterns in the relationships between events, activities, behaviors of things, and so on, which means that the very act of analysis is trying to break things down into cause and effect. If you think about it, the reality is really one connected whole, but it's very convenient and useful for us, and it's a very good tool to break it apart into pieces that that we can use a cause and effect kind of mentality or structure to analyze. It's a very, very useful way of looking at the world, from just a functional standpoint in day-to-day life. Always would have been, is seeing a tiger correlated with having my face eaten, but when you do it in a more refined way and you start saying, okay, does this, if I do this, does that follow? If I do this and I change this variable or this thing about the background or the context, does it still follow, and so on? And that's how you start to build a system of definitions wherein your cause-effect relationships are more refined and more reliable. If you take away cause and effect, then you're no longer doing science, you're doing something else.
Yes.
So yeah, in a sense it's axiomatic, in a sense it's definitional. It depends whether you count your definitions as axioms or not, which is just a philosophical irrelevance largely, especially in terms of the application and an argument. And just one last thing was when he said a mere pebble can cause an avalanche. Now, this is interesting, because what do you mean by cause? Like if there were no gravity or nothing for the pebble to interact with, which then further does causes and so on, then the pebble doesn't cause an avalanche. But so why do you get to say that's the pebble that caused it? That was the first move. It's just the first thing you're aware of, right? Or it's where you've decided to start the analysis, or you've decided to start the clock. And this is actually really key to look at, because if you don't realize that it's a matter of your own choice, taste, or convenience where you start the clock, and where you start the analysis, anywhere in the universe except at its exact beginning. That's the only actual objective where you don't get another choice where to start. If it has an exact beginning, then that is the only place where there's an objective actual start of the causation chain. Unless you throw out causality altogether, and then we're back to what I said about, are you even still doing science?
Yeah, this is interesting, because I've heard a very similar sort of argument being put forward for an explanation or a sort of a cop out from an infinite regress, or from trying to explain an infinite regress, right? That when you ask the question that if something is unending, why is it that you expect something to begin, right? That there's an unending series, any point on the infinite series, prior to it there is an unending series of events, time, or whatever else might be the case, right? But then they say, oh, you're taking it from an unending point, but why not just take it from point A and point B on the series? But that actually changes the dynamics. It's no longer infinite. You're talking about a finite set within
a finite segment of an infinite thing, which is interesting, because you can't take a finite proportion of an infinite thing as a proportion. And so what is your choice function? And this goes back to the axiom of choice and whether you take that and so on. And how are you structuring the notion of infinity that you're playing with? A lot of people don't realize that the mathematical infinity that you meet in real analysis and infinite series and so on is a particular type or kind of philosophical notion of infinity, quite apart from the fact that mathematically there's different types of infinity as well.
I've been informed of never-ending the Indian soap operas. Oh, that is interesting. One other question for you, brother. Maybe you would put your email address up there.
Yeah, sure, inshallah. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah,
sounds good.
You can come up to discuss a bit more if you want to, or just email the brother. If you put your email in there,
if you want, you can join the panel. I can share my email in the chat as well.
Yeah. All right, let's continue.
Now, that's a bold claim, I hear you all say. What evidence does Kyle offer to support his assertion?
So what caused the universe?
Now, that's a bold claim, I hear you all say. What evidence does Kyle offer to support his assertion that the entire universe is an effect, let alone that it's exclusively a material effect? Well, he misrepresents the Big Bang, which we'll get to in just a moment. First, I want to emphasize that by defining the universe as an effect, Kyle is assuming his conclusion of the universe having a cause. He's begging the question. He's trying to prove that the universe has a cause, all while assuming that the universe is an effect.
That's what is
Okay, so this is interesting what is being brought up here, right? Because he's claiming this is a fallacy. Is this a fallacy?
Well, I mean,
Is
begging
this
the
a
question.
fallacious position to hold?
Yeah, so begging the question is a fallacy, and it is true in a sense that if you say the universe is an effect, then necessarily the implication is that it had a cause, because all effects had a cause. It's part of the definition of being an effect. And so it does bake in the conclusion. However, begging the question is not the... It's funny because in a proper sort of, you know, system of logic, if you're using axiomatic logic and you know, deriving the consequences that follow, well, everything follows as soon as you've stated your axioms. You may not be aware that it follows because you might not have done the analysis yet, but it follows. So it kind of, if you want to take that view, you can reduce every logical argument to begging the question.
Yes.
And so it's kind of fair and it's kind of not fair. But the thing is, where begging the question makes sense is where you have two people in a discussion and they've already established mutual axioms or mutual propositions that they both agree on. And then you're supposed to derive based, you know, then you say, okay, but we disagree about these things and that's what we're talking about. Then if you then add in something that's not from your mutually agreed propositions, that would be genuine begging the question.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? But it really, for it to be useful, it has to rely on this notion that there are, you know, allowed shared propositions. Otherwise, your propositions lead to the conclusions, or you've made a logic error. So then everything's begging the question.
And here's one of the important things that is being ignored here, right? To me, it would be begging the questions if we were ignoring the idea of cause and effect. We see cause and effect in every little detail in the universe, right? That we see anytime something happens, you're assuming it happened because of something else that happened before, right? This is the natural a process that we have to that we assume with any event that is happening in this universe. Now the question is, why would you assume the opposite, that there is no cause to the universe itself? Why would you assume the opposite?
I would be very careful with that notion. So okay, let's take it back a sec. Everything is managed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And all with wisdom. So whenever something is seen to happen, there will be something that follows on something that was prior that makes sense. There's some connection, right? Because there's no wasted, spurious stuff, right? So there's a good explanation from the Islamic view as to why we observe cause and effect, right? Or why when we look with that lens, it works, right? So it's actually really a mistake, I think, to think, oh, A actually caused B, because that actually gives the agency to A, rather than saying Allah to Allah used A and interacted it with B.
And I agree on that part, Brother Islam. But what I'm saying is, we're even from a naturalistic perspective, the perspective that he should be holding right now, isn't he going to assume in his own worldview, if something happens, that it happened because of something else, that there was a cause to it?
He does with everything. He uses this to, eviscerate people who bring pretty much any religious perspective. He appeals to naturalistic explanations, and he says that anything else is an extraordinary claim requiring extraordinary evidence, and the evidence is never sufficient, because he never really sets where the bar goes. So yeah, I do find this worryingly hypocritical. I don't think he sees his hypocrisy in it, because I think he wouldn't bring it if he saw it. But I mean, in a sense, it's ironic he called it begging a question, because he's actually appealing to something that someone like Stephen should hold as being a basic foundation anyway, being a naturalist.
All right. So let's.
So bear in mind, I said that because with begging the question, it means that you're adding something that is not shared propositions in order to make your argument work.
Yeah.
As opposed to arguing from the shared foundations. And so,
Yes.
cause and effect should be in the shared foundations for a naturalist.
All right, let's continue. Let's see where this goes.
While assuming that the universe is an effect.
That's what is popular today, that there was some type of singularity that exploded in something called the Big Bang. But then when you try to get down to the bottom of what's a singularity, well, what we hear from the scientific just to us, the cosmologists, they say, well, a singularity was something that popped into existence from nothing.
Except they don't, though, do they, Kyle? You're making things up again, aren't you, Kyle? As the theoretical physicist Sean Carroll puts it.
We use the phrase the Big Bang to refer to that earliest moment of the history of the universe where we don't understand what is going on. It's a placeholder for our lack of understanding.
We don't get to call the grand cosmos an effect, since we simply don't know what happened before the Big Bang.
Proof number.
Okay, so
that's quite interesting.
This is right down your alley.
Well, if you take singularity as being defined as where we, the placeholder for where we don't understand what's going on, you will only find Sean Carroll and people repeating Sean Carroll as that being a definition of the singularity in the Big Bang. He's not referred to anything that's generally well accepted, and it's in a sense also a tongue-in-cheek way of talking about it. And Sean Carroll is not just speaking as an uninfluenced physicist. He has a very particular theological position. He's like an ambassador for the Atheist Society and all this other kind of stuff. He's had a long portion of his career. He specifically makes statements and takes a lens on these things in a way that sort of supports his atheism and supports the atheist position. But yeah, the idea that it marks the point where we don't understand what's going on is not untrue, but it's certainly not the definition. It's more of a consequence. And in terms of where something comes from nothing, well, of course, as we discussed before in the definition of science, that would be outside the realm of science to pronounce on, and that's why physics has not pronounced on what's before what they can analyze. But also bear in mind, all of this stuff, the singularity itself existing is a theory that's held by the majority, but that majority has been weakening somewhat. There are more and more cracks appearing in the inflationary model. And there's more and more support for the need for another kind of model entirely. I think conformal cosmic psychology, conformal cyclic cosmology is a fairly good candidate. Yeah, so anyway, yeah, so I guess that's what I said. That's what I wanted to say on it. The only thing is, like, what's he supposed to say? So this Christian guy, what's he supposed to say about the singularity? Because obviously it's there's a sense in which either it came from nothing or it came from something, right? How much detail of physics does he have to go into? Because if he does anything less than a 2-hour lecture full of all the equations, he's gonna say something that's wrong, because every simplification is wrong, right? So
yeah, exactly. And here's an interesting thing. I just want to go back to where he starts talking about this, and just talk about the phraseology he uses. And the kind of holes that are poked by atheists on the choice of terms. I
Is
just want
an
to point those out.
effect.
That's what is popular today, that there was some type of singularity that exploded in something called the Big Bang. But then when you try to get down to the bottom of what's a singularity, well, what we hear from the scientific community that suggests to us, the cosmologists, they say, well, a singularity was something that popped into existence from nothing.
Okay, so as far as what he said, I know it's an overly simplistic explanation of a very complex and very varied concepts that explain observations which we don't have fully, and not anyone. I wouldn't say that anybody understands fully what the observations are, right? Because we're still observing more, and the more we know, the better we sort of understand what it may be. But it's we were not there. We're just guessing at the end of the day, right? So number one, the use of the word explosion. There's a there's a number of times where I've seen atheists sort of pick on that particular choice of word, that it
I
was
pick on
not
it
an
too.
explosion. Yeah, but if you're trying to explain it to a layman in simplistic terms, does the word explosion carry the meaning that you want to convey?
It does in actually depends on exactly which point in the inflationary. If we talk about just the inflationary model at the moment, simplify, it depends at which point you look, because at the beginning, according to inflationary model, you have this extremely negative pressure, extremely low entropy state, and that is anything but an explosion. It's like the exact opposite, and then because of its negative pressure and so on, it evolves in a certain kind of way. And then there's some critical point where it all suddenly expands in a chaotic way. And explosion is the best word we have for that, other than the maths. The only real nuance is that, explosion throws matter into the space and time around it, whereas this explosion is, the space and time is quote unquote being created, for good reasons, as the events of the interactions happen very rapidly and chaotically. So yeah, explosion really is fine as long as you're referring to, I think it's T minus about, I think it's 10 to the minus 16 or something. So because it's before that where you have this negative pressure, more highly ordered state. Yeah, so I don't like the picking on explosion thing. But when he said, the scientific consensus is it comes from nothing, I mean, that is just untrue, because the scientific consensus is it comes from we don't know what.
So it's something.
The thing is, and that's with a big star though, because most will say it comes from, and then XYZ being my pet theory, or being some big, some big broad category of things, and they think something like this, something like that. But there has to be something, as long as you're still doing physics. Otherwise, you're not doing physics anymore.
So don't you think that a very famous atheist, Lawrence Krauss, is to be blamed for that nothing argument? Because he popularized this idea of a universe from nothing. And that was at one point taken as the atheists themselves were taking that as a field day, that we don't need a god because the universe came from nothing.
It's a beautiful irony, that, isn't it? I mean, Allah knows best if he should get the blame. He certainly did popularize in his book, but he popularized something that previously existed, a view that previously exists. However, that view is itself patently a misrepresentation, because the nothing is not nothing. It's a quantum field.
He defines that in his book. Yes, you're right.
Yeah, because it's not nothing, and the other thing is this zero energy cosmology, where basically you get negative energy in one term and positive energy in another term, and they cancel out, is cheating on many levels. For one thing, it's not really no energy. It's an energy with a value of 0. But it's not the same thing as having nothing by any stretch of the imagination. And that's before you even think about these quantum fields and the curvature of space-time, which are the two different signed components. And the thing is, this theory depends on what's called the isotropy of space. The isotropy of space, which means it looks the same in all directions. But the observations we have are that it doesn't look the same in all directions. There's something called the axis of evil, which is quite a funny name, which is a well-defined particular axis that you can see in the cosmic microwave background. So on the largest scale of the observable universe we have, that shows that it has a particular preferred axis that's kind of got an angular momentum around. And there's other imperfections in the homogeneity and isotropy, but this quote unquote from nothing or zero energy relies on precise, exact isotropy and homogeneity, and any deviation from it immediately blows the whole thing away. So there's this thing where on the one side, it's like, if they can put together any kind of view and forgive everything they want, they can find some way and say, this is plausible, and then they'll back it or speak as if it's a good scientific theory. Whereas when facing the other direction, if there exists any hole whatsoever, that it's just not scientific, it's garbage, and it's not even evidence. There's a very black and white and double standard that goes on there.
So there's a couple of comments I would bring up because they're interesting. Mighty Sarlacc says, no, the universe is eternal. Now, I would, before you add anything, this is my understanding. If something is eternal, it has to be unchanging. It has to be outside its time, right? For me. Otherwise, you're basically taking a quasi-eternal approach where something is within time, it is changing, and it's sort of on a scale of time which is infinite, and you're calling that as eternal. To me, that is not an eternal existence. Eternal means that it is unchanging. Would you agree with this sort of
not
the way
necessarily.
this would be?
Not necessarily. I would say to be eternal would mean it needs to have at least one unchanging characteristic. But you can hypothetically imagine say a mass on a spring or a spinning top or something where there's zero resistance and it just carries on oscillating or spinning forever. And so it's, in the sense that it's oscillating or spinning, then there's some kind of change or dynamics. But then, it being a spinning top or a mass spring or whatever becomes part of its eternal characteristics in that view. I mean, it's a bold claim to say the universe is eternal. It is contrary to pretty much all of the evidence. There is really no good reason other than wishful thinking to take that view. It's almost impossible, not completely impossible, to support with modern physical theories or with a lot of foundational logic and so on. So I don't really know what to do with that claim unless there's some meat put on the bones. It's just wishful thinking, to be honest.
So one of the reasons why I'm very much opposed to the idea of accepting something as eternal when it has it's subject to change is because of change itself, right? Because then you're looking at that thing as a brute fact. You're forcing some properties onto it which you cannot justify except by begging the question, right? Because if something keeps changing, right, it might very well as not exist as can exist, because it is a contingent existence now, right? So
I think
for
it depends on the kind of changing you're talking about, but pretty
yes,
much, yeah. Because remember, this eternal isn't necessarily a necessary existence.
that is true. It isn't necessarily a necessary existence, but then it becomes very difficult to explain why something that is subject to change, why it can be eternal, right? Because
Well,
it is
I think one of the things to point out here is the difference between idealized change, where you're making up an ideal hypothetical, like for example the mass on a spring that can go on forever, versus any actual real change that could ever actually happen. Because any actual real spring would eventually wear out, or there would be resistance, and so on and so forth. And so, yeah, you do have to just make up completely unrealistic ideals in order to take that kind of view. And this is one of the things. Allah is uniquely different from His creation. So if Mighty Sarlach actually thought about it properly, he would realize that it makes an awful lot more sense for anything that is eternal to be the necessary being. And a free naturalist says the most honest thing to do regarding the mysteries of the universe is admitting we don't know. I would agree with that. Actually, I would agree. Anything that we don't know, we should say that we don't know. Anything we claim, we should have the evidences for the claims. We know very little about the universe. I only can say with any confidence what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us, or what we've observed, which is reading the signs Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put there for us. But to say, I'm not sure if what it means, but the implication is if I think, because this is what I think normally he says free naturalist, I assume, obviously being a naturalist, normally what that means is have intellectual humility, because you could, if you are restricted to only reading the book of nature as such, then you could always be wrong. And I would also agree with that, because unless Allah exists and tells you, it could be wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Because you weren't there when the universe was formed. You weren't there witnessing the creation of life. You weren't there as a witness to all of these events taking place.
And everything we can infer relies on accepting existing beliefs and theories.
Yeah. Okay, so that's interesting. By the way, Mighty Sarlach, I know you've been you have a few comments in there. I would recommend just when the link is up, do jump on. We would love to have a conversation with you, right? And obviously, free naturalists.
Okay.
Yeah, and free naturalists, you're welcome anytime you're ready, right? We'll love to have a conversation with you. All right.
Yeah, we'll just try and get through some of these videos, but happy to have a conversation with either. And regarding Mighty Sarlach's question, the follow-up question, I did flesh out the argument a bit, but hop on, have a chat. It'll be more tailored.
All right.
Bang.
Proof number 2. Design demands a designer. It is a truism that everybody recognizes that this universe looks designed. In fact, when we see the various different aspects of nature, and we see birds and squirrels and trees
and parasites and cancer and birth defects and billions of uninhabitable planets in a vast universe that's overwhelmingly deadly to all known living organisms. Yeah, it never ceases to irritate me that proponents of teleological arguments ignore the abhorrent designs of life for they contradict an omnibenevolent, omnipotent God. Look at the trees, they say, not the zombie fungus upon its branches that's been lovingly designed to infest living creatures to split their body open.
Where does design originate?
Okay.
Let's
I didn't know that he actually switched there.
He was.
Do you want to go through this second one before? He switched in the middle, right?
Let's just go through. through the bit. No, it's fine. We'll go through just a bit he said, and sort of each of his
Yeah.
integrations. So obviously, a guy says design demands a designer, and the universe, the world looks designed. I mean,
Yes.
it's interesting. Would it look designed if you have no notion of a designer for this sort of thing? Difficult to say. The ancient Greeks thought that a lot of it just was, and their gods sort of just interacted with it as such, and that it was eternal. not unironically, because that's where a lot of the atheist perspectives are just built on the Greek perspective. That's where they came from. So, I mean, I came to believe that it was designed when I came to believe that the Quran is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Interesting. So here's
what's interesting though, when he says design demands a designer. Well, yes, that's a tautology. Are things well designed? Now, this actually goes back to free rationalists, or was he free naturalists' statement about having intellectual humility. How can you have intellectual humility and say that there's some abhorrent designs? How can you possibly know the purposes and reasons for the things that you think are terrible? So as a Muslim, I believe that Allah is all wise and knowledgeable and merciful, and so wherever what I see does not look wise and merciful, then I'm missing something, right?
Yeah.
And that's sort of the way to understand things. But the other thing is, this is just dunya. This is not Jannah. This is not paradise. This is a specific.
Not supposed to
place.
be perfected. Yeah.
Right. This is a specific place for a specific purpose, and it's interesting to me why Christian or others, even Dais sometimes bring this, because we are not able to assess independently the perfection of the design. We believe it's perfect because we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it's perfect for its intended purpose, which doesn't mean it's Jannah. It's got an intended purpose which we only understand a minute fraction of. But this idea that anyone can say, parts of it are badly designed or inefficiently designed, it's just utter hubris. It can't be anything but a certain level of arrogance, whether realized or not. Sometimes people can be misled and think it's not arrogant to say such and such, but ultimately it relies on a judgment that one can't be in a position to make.
Yeah, it is very telling when a number of times when you ask the atheists to elaborate on their positions, they would actually fall back to this idea that they do not know, and hence they're being intellectually honest in claiming that this intellectual humility, this argument from intellectual humility. But yet, when it comes to these matters where you're supposed to, as a human being, not know so much, right? This is why we continue doing science. If we knew everything, we wouldn't be performing scientific experiments. We wouldn't be stretching the boundaries of knowledge and reason, right?
We also wouldn't be finite beings.
We wouldn't be finite beings as well. True. So this very idea that you will pick and choose where you're going to show intellectual humility, it is deceptive at times.
It is, but this is fully from the shayateen. It's a really powerful deception, because I can testify, when I was atheist, I just could not realize, I could not see how many double standards I had in this sort of thing. For me, it was
Hmm.
just evident that, you know, this has to be this way, and so it's there's nothing wrong with saying it. It's not being arrogant to say something has to be that way. You know, it just didn't occur to me that has to be this way is actually based on a limited understanding and on presupposing my position and all this sort of stuff.
All right, let's continue. I'm going to bring that up.
Does design originate? Well, what you and I both know is that when you see things that function and they're complex, that design comes from an intelligent designer. Big explosions just simply don't bring about order. They don't cause things that are functional and complex to come into existence.
But putting aside the abhorrent designs, notice that this is William Paley's watchmaker analogy. It's the whole: a painting requires a painter, a building requires a builder, and therefore a human requires a human maker. It's the claim that complexity requires a creator. Now, I've said this before, and I'll say this again. If I lived before Charles Darwin published The Origin of Species, there's a very high chance that I would be a deist, explicitly due to how convincing teleological arguments were before the publication of this masterpiece. There's a reason why the paradigm shift of Darwin is recognized as one of, if not the most important in history. Evolution by natural selection explains exactly how unconscious natural forces can and have produced exceeding complexity. Furthermore, it perfectly explains the vile as well as the beauty, and the near perfect as well as the catastrophic failures. God, on the other hand, is and will always be an argument from ignorance. We don't know, therefore God. The trees are beautiful, therefore God. The glomerata wasp reproduces by forcibly injecting its larvae into caterpillars, therefore, let's just get to the next.
There was no argument from ignorance presented. We don't know, therefore God. And that is never actually the argument from theism or of theism. That's just a complete straw man. And I don't know why people feel they can still present it. And if anything, it's a reflection of how they arrive at their own beliefs. But now to go back to, you know, big explosions don't bring about order and don't cause things that are functional and correct, I think he said. It's not the watchmaker argument. The watchmaker argument is about you stumble across something that looks designed, like a watch on a beach, and you would assume you're the more likely position to take is that it had a designer. That's the and the watchmaker argument is really it's not a full-fledged logical argument. It's more like a watchmaker illustration as to why it doesn't actually make sense to say the default position is there's no designer. But the argument that the Christian apologist gave was actually a really, really good argument. But Stephen, unfortunately, completely missed it. And this shows how prejudiced he is about you know what, and it's not necessarily you know, I don't mean that as a jibe at him. I mean he has certain boxes in his head that religious people fit in, and whatever they say is going to be put in one of those boxes. What he said is big explosions don't bring about order. Yeah, look at thermodynamics and entropy. It's absolutely right. You know, they lead to much more chaos. They lead to more disorder. They lead to disordering of the systems. That's a key point. Where did the order come from? Where does the information come from? If you take the information theoretic view of entropy analysis, although that's potentially, you know, contentious, but not that contentious. So yeah, he's actually right. And I says, even though explosion is only used as an approximate term, you know, he's correct. And this is what's also funny is when he says big explosions don't bring about order, that applies equally well for rocks, right? It applies equally well for stars, right? It doesn't. So the idea that it automatically applies to you know, living organisms and so on, his argument is independent of whether the thing is classified as living or unliving. It's a really good argument. And was completely missed and completely misrepresented. One last thing worth mentioning is Stephen presents Darwinism as being a paradigm shift because it had never been thought of before, and it was like a revolutionary new thinking in the world. And as I said before, Ibn Jahiz wrote his book on nature, which included these selection mechanisms and so on, something like 1,000 years before Darwin. It just didn't have the same kind of paradigm shift effect because it just naturally integrated with the Islamic viewpoint without a problem, and it didn't lead to the justification of racist colonialism, which is one of the reasons why it was so important to popularize it at the time.
So here's a thought that just popped into my head. Do you think that for those denying the idea that there is design in this universe, that for these people, the question should be, why are you then expecting results when you perform scientific experiments? Because that is impossible to do unless unless one of the axiom that you're basing your scientific worldview on is that there is a design that can actually be confirmed. There are some laws. There is a specific result that can be achieved by performing a certain number of steps and so on.
I would ask anyone to define what they mean by design or designed in a way that isn't just simply saying, has a designer, because the whole question is, does it have a designer, right? Because when you look at biological functions, and even whether you talk about, kinetin and dynein operating like chemical motors, or you talk about the interaction of a cell as a whole, is often viewed as being like a kind of factory. Like all of it looks like intricate mechanism, right? Mm-hmm. And even when you talk about the orbiting of planets and so on, looks like a kind of clockwork. And in fact, is the original inspiration for clockwork, right?
Yeah.
So, Antikythera mechanism for reference. So, yeah, I mean, how are you going to define what a design is, or what something being designed means? And this is a question that goes to someone claiming this is evidence of a designer, as well as someone claiming that there's no evidence of designer or designer. Because what is it that doesn't look designed? Like everything is some kind of incredibly intricate machine. So what does, if that doesn't look designed, then what does look designed mean? Or is the idea of looking designed meaningless, which is frankly gaslighting? Because some things do look designed. But what we really tend to mean is looks man-made, right? Or especially what a naturalist would mean, is looks man-made versus looks natural or organic, because organic stuff is quote unquote messier because there's always some kind of variation in it. Like no two leaves are exactly identical, for example. So yeah, I think it's an interesting question for both. All
right, there's
a lot of levels to it.
There are. Let's go to the next few ones very quickly. And Cosmic, I see you in the backstage, but just let us finish through this video, and then I'll bring you up. All right?
Oh, okay. Yeah. The last thing is he said it's an argument from ignorance.
Oh yes, the God of the gaps. God of the gaps argument.
In no way was an argument from ignorance presented at all. That is just plastered on. It's not even a straw man.
Is this a God of the gap argument, Brother Islam? Is there a God of the gaps argument being made here?
No, not at all. Because for that to be made, he would have to say, we don't know of any other way this could happen, therefore God. Yeah. Which is not the argument he made. He said explosions don't lead to order, which is correct thermodynamics.
And what we're positing here in this particular argument is a designer and not essentially God. Yes, there are implications of the designer being God, accepting the designer, and that has implications that it is God because of the transcendental nature of.
Oh, actually,
the-
that's a really good point, because people talk about simulation theory, right? And they all of a sudden it's very plausible that everything has a designer, as long as that designer is some super hyper advanced aliens or something else.
Yeah.
As long as it's
Anything
not
other
God.
than God.
Anything but God.
Because then they have to
Yeah.
listen to God.
Yeah, but if things like simulation theory or whatever are you know, in any sense valid, then you know that would mean that everything is designed as well. Yeah. And so they can't, because you often see atheists who would say, oh no, things don't look designed, but then also say, oh, you know, it could all be living in a simulation under aliens or something. Which is, yeah, to me, very, very strange to take those positions, because then you're taking a position that everything it's either consistent with it is consistent with the designer and is not consistent with the designer.
Yeah. It's a contradictory position to hold, which is more fallacious than anything else that you can blame the theist for. Let's continue.
Yep.
Proof number 3.
Argument.
Life demands a supernatural life giver. You see, in the material world, we have come to understand of biogenesis. Law of biogenesis simply says this, that in this material, natural world, life comes from previously existing life of its own kind.
Shall we? Shall we Google Carl's definition? Yeah, 2 results, one of which being a mirror by a Presbyterian church and the other being a quote of Carl's video.
Now, when we look at how people used to think about life, they said, no, life can arise spontaneously from non-living chemicals. And yet every single biological experiment has shown us that that simply is biologically impossible. Life doesn't arise from non-living chemicals.
Back in the day, Aristotle and his motley crew inferred that since complex organisms emerge from such things as soil and rotten carcasses, it follows that complex organisms can spontaneously arise from non-living substance. But in the 19th century, Louis Pasteur and John Tyndall disproved this long-established belief by demonstrating that complex organisms are the product of reproduction. Rotten meat doesn't produce flies. The fly larva within the rotten meat produces flies. Creationists such as Carl like to act as if this disproved the hypothesis of abiogenesis, which is the natural process by which single-celled organisms, as opposed to complex organisms, emerge from non-living matter. But it doesn't.
Where did life originate if it doesn't arise?
Okay, is this an argument from silence that is being referred to here? Just the fact that abiogenesis has not been disproved, hence it can be true. Don't you have to demonstrate that abiogenesis is possible before you start claiming that? Because to me, it's a good argument from silence, where it's a valid argument from silence.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that the waters are a bit muddied because there is a significant group of abiogenesis researchers who have claimed that we largely know the mechanism and all this kind of stuff. And Dr. Jim Tour has done a great job of showing they're all very, very misleading. Basically frauds, to be honest, in the way they present their research versus what their research actually is. I like Dr. James, believe one day we will find the mechanism that Allah used, like, or rather the way, it's not like Allah uses a mechanism, the way Allah does it, when we look at it, looks like a mechanism. You know, when we look at it through the scientific lens. Remember what I said before about cause and effect being part of the definition of this stuff. So yeah, Allah did it. It happened. So somehow we may or may not be revealed to us. We may or may not be able to find exactly how that happened, but we're nowhere near having it yet. So in a sense, I agree with abiogenesis, with the crucial caveat of on its own. What does on its own mean? On its own, nothing happens whatsoever. And this is a crucial distinction, though, between the Christian and the Islamic worldview. You know, we believe that Allah is actively managing and moving everything by his qadr, right? So, you know, there is no motion, movement, change, nothing, you know, without him. There's no things in the first place. So this thing of on its own doesn't really exist, because it's always with the permission of Allah or by the power of Allah.
let's actually go back and see if he attributes agency to something that does not hold agency.
Which one, Stephen?
Yes, let's see.
Oh yeah.
Humanists such as Carl like to act as if this disproves the hypothesis of abiogenesis, which is the natural process by which single-celled organisms, as opposed to complex organisms, emerge from non-living matter. But it doesn't.
Where did life originate?
This is the point where he's talking about it. The natural process by which that's not how it happens. The process is something which is initiated by someone. It requires an agent to initiate a process, regardless of what process we're doing. Give me 1 second.
Well, again, remember what I said before about where are you counting initiation from?
Mhm.
You know,
Yes, exactly.
if I throw a stone at a window, but the video starts with the stone just flying through the air, the stone initiates the window breaking. But if I'm included
Yes.
in the frame, then I initiated it, and then someone blames my parents and say my parents initiated it. It's
But
like
that's the
choosing to
thing,
start
right?
history on October the 7th.
When someone is killed by a bullet or a knife, you don't put the knife or the bullet in jail, right?
No.
Why is it that you're going after a human being or an existence like that? Because of this very idea that it is these people who make the choice that results in that outcome. This is the important part of it, which is ignored a number of times by atheists. But yes, let's see, from where did life arise? It is one of the most profound questions to ask, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he brings this question up a number of times in the Quran, right? Of how the rain comes down and it creates life out of dead earth, right? And then it goes back into death as well. And then so this idea of him being the originator of life is something which is it's a profound it's something profound which if you ponder upon, you actually come to a conclusion that there has to be a God. This is a very profound question to look for an answer for if you're searching for why there must be a God.
When you say that, what strikes me is actually, for me, pondering that question, the most value from it was really discovering more about myself and my thinking. What is it about me and my thoughts and my emotions that leads me to find one or the other a more attractive scenario? Actually putting aside the rationality in a way. So it's almost like there's irrational thoughts going on or whatever, but have you ever heard of this and audibly, I'm not saying to do this, but there's some life coaches or whatever give this advice of, if you're not sure which option to take, you give one option to heads and the other option to tails on a coin. You flip a coin and then you see if you're disappointed by the answer or not. And if you're disappointed, change to the other one. Right? And so actually that kind of thing, if you follow different lines of reasoning and you also look inside yourself and find, am I attracted to or repelled from various different things, that can tell you where your own biases are, and it can tell you a lot about yourself. So I would actually say the most value from pondering this question comes from introspection. And if you do that with a clean heart, I do think you'll arrive at a belief in Allah. But not necessarily. The thing is, I don't think anyone's belief should be founded on such and such argument from such and such observations. That's a whole nother discussion though, because that itself means your foundation is actually on what you previously believed. You've baked in a whole load of stuff where you're wrong, and so you actually baked in some quite weak foundations. It's more like you taking away everything that's not essential and leaving only the essential is like a stronger way of arriving at something.
All right, let's see. from where did life arise? It's
If it doesn't arise from non-living chemicals, you see, the idea that there's no God suggests to us that there had to be some singularity without a cause that exploded, and that explosion brought about design, which we've never, ever seen happen. And then ultimately, somewhere the non-living chemicals gave rise to life, but that's biologically impossible.
Again, spontaneous generation has been disproved, but abiogenesis most certainly hasn't. To say that it is impossible that single-celled organisms emerge from non-organic matter is to display one's complete ignorance of science and epistemology.
Proof number 4.
okay. Anything to add there, or it was pretty much going back to the same point again, right?
Yeah, I mean, but it's interesting that Stephen wasn't able to give any actual argument. He just said, this is to show no understanding of. Actually, it shows quite significant understanding of the science. Whether this chap has any or not, the view does, especially when, if you substitute for where he says explosion brought about design, if you substitute that for order, which is a more powerful form of the argument, essentially, then he's absolutely
Order from
right.
chaos, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so where did the order from? How did the order from chaos happen? And that is something that you know, one way or another, you're putting some kind of Maxwell's demons in there, and so on. You know.
Yeah, and the other thing is, it
What usually
shows.
happens, just for the sake of the video, is there's other things that are considered out of scope for this discussion, which are somehow some low entropy source of energy, and then so that becomes the explanation, and then this becomes settled, and then when they move on to, well, what about that low entropy source? How did that originally come from this highly disordered state? It suddenly becomes a whole new discussion, and it's irrelevant. It's separated.
So it's just pushing the explanation one step further, right? It's not
all
giving
about
an
kicking the can out of the boundary, wherever the boundary is. Yeah.
And the one thing that I would say is that the theist is, at least he's showing that he understands the limitations of science and the limitations of scientific inquiry, right? That there are certain answers you will never get from science, which where I feel that a number of atheists actually miss those limitations, that science can only lead you to a certain point. It can give you an answer to certain questions, not every question that is important and that should be asked or needs to be asked, right?
I don't know which questions it can actually answer. I don't think that. I think it's a very common. I think it's a very common view, but I don't think it's correct. I think what it actually does is eliminates possibilities.
That's actually a more precise way of speaking about it. But definitely, I would say that you would never get an answer. To put it another way, from science, you would never get an answer for the why. Why did something happen? Yes, you get an answer for how did certain things happen, because you can observe things. And then again, that's a question. Is it the observation itself or the scientific inquiry into it that we're talking about?
I think this, depending on what exactly you mean by why, I think this connects quite deeply with Hume's maxim, you can't get an ought from an is.
Yes.
And science only actually describes what is, but pretends, or people pretend, that it answers why questions. Why does something happen? Because they're reframed as cause and effect questions, where cause becomes a why answer. You know, but really all that is an extension of the description of what things are. It's a fake answer to the why questions. But something you said, this guy, I don't think he's giving any evidence of understanding the science, to be honest. But the arguments he's giving, like I said, they do have, or especially the you know, order from chaos stuff, has scientific you know, grounding, or could have scientific grounding or philosophical awareness. But you can't tell because of how simple his video is. He could be a very advanced philosopher who's very, very good at really simplifying stuff, and that's the audience this is written for. Or this could be his maximal limit, and as far as he understands stuff, I literally just can't tell. So
Yeah, but to mischaracterize these in the way that they've been done, that is actually I don't think that is befitting of anyone doing that. Don't
No, but it
mischaracterize
shows
that.
how bad faith Stephen, went into it, because
Yeah.
he doesn't he treats the guy as if this is his very best, very most refined, philosophically covered
The
off
uninvolved,
thing.
the
Yeah,
uninvolved theist, right?
yeah.
Sort of speaking.
Rather than thinking, okay, maybe this is a oversimplified or a particularly simplified view. What's he really getting at with this? Because when Stephen simplifies stuff, I could tear it all apart, but what's the point if I have to have understood correctly where he's coming from? And this is where I think Stephen really missed the mark, where clearly this guy is talking about order from chaos, and that's just not mentioned at all, and he just talks about evolution, which
Yes.
yeah.
All right. Let's go through the fourth point fully, and then I'll stop at the end, and we'll talk about that.
Moral law demands a moral lawgiver. If some things are objectively morally right and other things are objectively morally wrong, then there must be a God.
I recently created a response to Karl Barth's colleague Eric Lyons, who expressed this same sentiment. And just as Eric defines moral laws as divine edicts, so too does Karl.
You see, if we evolved from primordial slime over multiplied millions of years, at what point did objective moral values arise? We don't say that dog violates a rule and he steals them from another dog. We don't see violated a objective moral value. We just don't say that.
While objective moral frameworks exist, the type of objective moral framework that Karl insists upon, divine command theory, doesn't. If divine moral laws did exist, then by virtue of them being divine, it would follow that a God exists. But again, they don't. Even among those that claim that they do, their so-called objective morality has historically demonstrated itself to be every bit as whimsical objective as any other moral framework. At one point, divorce was objectively condemned. Now, not so much. Unbaptized babies went into limbo, now they're in heaven, and women were once objectively less than men, but now they're just different.
Proof number 5.
Okay, so we hear this. This is probably one of the most common arguments brought up by atheists. Now, for me, it is always them putting the cart before the horse to bring up morality as an argument for God. If you can establish God first, that God exists, then we can have a discussion on morality, because that to us is the basis for morality and accepting morality as objective, right? You can say that morality is subject to God's whatever God commands it is to be, but for everything else that exists, morality becomes objective because that's the command issued by God, right? So from that perspective, it is it's one of the things that happens with atheists is how they mischaracterize the understanding of objective morality that theists hold, and then attack the straw man either by saying that if it is subjective to God, then it cannot be objective. Nobody is claiming it to be perfectly objective. It's a false dilemma that is being set up there, right? So, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends what you mean by objective. I mean, the so-called quote-unquote God's eye view is synonymous with objectivity, even among atheists, non-theists. It used to be used, particularly if you look at physics books. I don't know why, from sort of 1930s up to even the 1960s, and so even Feynman famously used this in his lectures as a device. So this sort of God's eye view thing, it obviously is a proxy for objectivity, because objectivity is supposed to mean that I as a subjective experience, you as a subjective experience, because each of us has limited perception, limited memory, limited knowledge, and so on. But the God does not have limits in those things. So the God would have the objective perspective. But it's true that if you have a broken notion of God, especially if you think of it as a God rather than the God, then you could think of it as being a superlative subjective perspective rather than a genuinely objective one. But that's also frankly silly, but never mind, because it depends upon a broken notion of God anyway. If God has all the wisdom, all the knowledge, all the perspective, then that is the objective view. I think regarding what you said, though, I agree with the caveat that if you find someone who claims they are an atheist, but also believes in objective morality and really believes in it, I do think that's a good basis you can use to start to arrive or get closer towards belief in the God. Because there's really, I don't believe, any other way for objective morality to exist. So if you keep going enough, you'll get there. It's a bit odd in a video because I don't think Stephen.
No,
unlike
that's probably not the argument that he was making, but if we go back to his argument,
yeah, he was saying if moral laws. So there's two things, because this is what I was going to say is so Alex O'Connor, for example, is an atheist that this guy knows and is friends with and so on, who does believe in objective morality, but I don't think Stephen does, and I think that's quite clear. What he's talking here is he's saying, well, it's changing, so it's not objective, but again, this is all sorts of errors. The church position is not the same thing as the objective morality of God. So I don't know. It's almost like a facetious argument. He knows this. Like he knows this very thoroughly. He knows that the church view is not the objective morality for anyone except the sort of hardcore sects of Catholicism.
Yeah, that's true, and it's
when it comes comes from a lawgiver. I mean, if it's objective morality, it comes from the only one who can give objective moral laws. Correct.
Now over here, obviously, he's specifying Christian objective morality has changed according to cultural winds, and it's a valid question to ask, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it holds true for every theistic argument, because we know that Christians don't even accept the laws in their books as laws that they should be following. The moral laws in the Old Testament have been abrogated in the New Testament, and they don't have a new moral law to follow through. So
and Jesus said, "I've not come to change one jot or tittle of the law." And then there they are eating pork. And just one thing to point out: notice how he specifically says Christian objective morality.
Yes,
in response
exactly.
To
when at the beginning,
at the beginning of the video, he's saying, "Oh, which God?
Which God?
Hold
exactly."
On. Cheeky.
So cheeky. Yes. Okay. Let's continue. By the way, Toothpaste, I saw you with your camera on. I'll bring you on after Cosmic. Cosmic has been first. You will have to wait because when we have these discussions, they might go on for a while. And we're trying to wrap up this review in the next 5 or 10 minutes or so. All right. Let's go ahead.
Different. Proof number 5, free will exists. The atheistic idea that there is no God is founded on the idea of materialism. The idea that this material world is all that there is, all that there was, and all that there ever will be. Because of that, atheism has to suggest that you as a person don't really have free will.
Jesus Christ, what a load of gishgallop. First, Carl fails to define what type of free will he's referring to. Is it libertarianism or compatibilism? Because compatibilism is compatible with materialism, whereas libertarianism is not. Second, atheism is not the idea that there is no God. Indeed, it's not an idea at all. It's a lack of being convinced of the idea that at least one God exists. And third, atheism is not founded on materialism. There are plenty of atheists that believe in all sorts of supernatural, non-materialistic things, from astrology to ghosts to telekinesis to libertarian free will and beyond. This is just an unfortunate common straw man from Carl.
And proof number 6, human reasoning.
Okay, so I know the free will argument. He didn't necessarily address it, right? and probably we can actually do a bit more justice to this in our discussion here. So number one, for me, I don't think there is any grounding that you can suggest as an atheist. Yes, maybe with other explanations of your worldview, that a naturalist, a materialist, libertarian, humanist, or whatever else might be there, right? You can actually come up with some form of an understanding of free will. But as an atheist, it does not. It's an incomplete worldview. It does not address this at all, right? Whereas most religious views hold on to a more comprehensive understanding of reality, and they will hold within their within the core concepts, right? These important elements that are needed for you to be guided into what sort of life you should be leading.
Mhm.
This is the reason why I feel that atheists need to do a better job of explaining who they are. The onus is on you, because you're actually the one holding on to a worldview, an outlook that is not fully defined by just calling yourself an atheist. There needs to be a lot more, and a lot more
Well,
clarity that you need to give.
right, and this is what we said before. Atheism isn't substantial enough to really imply much at all. It's a label on stuff. And it's correct to say usually they're naturalists rather than materialists. That's sort of the default position that an atheist is usually in. But yeah, you can have someone who's says they're atheists, but actually believes in various kind of deities, including people like Stephen. Anyone who takes humanism has effectively made either themselves or the collective as a deity, according to the Abrahamic view of what deity is. They've made themselves a false god, false deity, which is still a type of deity as opposed to non-deity things. But that kind of distinction or nuance is just completely absent from most of the Western philosophical discourse.
Yeah, from
I don't. What I
an
don't like.
Islamic perspective,
Yeah, go on.
just want to finish up, because this is a very interesting point. From an Islamic perspective, if you're defining that I'm an atheist and I'm a naturalist and I'm a humanist and all of this and that, right? You're either taking each one of these ideologies as your ilah, or you're taking your own desire as your ilah, because then you're picking and choosing whatever you want as this is what it is, this is who I am, or this is what it is, right? And that
Well,
is
they
the
wouldn't be
ilah
taking the
here.
ideologies as an ilah. They'd be taking either the ideologies creators, or they'd be taking themselves, or
Yeah,
they'd be taking,
a good
various things
distinction.
as illahs. The implication of which is that they end up with these ideologies. Yeah.
Yeah, or
Uh,
themselves essentially,
yeah.
because then it comes back to their desire, whichever way they
Yeah.
want to pick and choose.
But
Yeah.
I think any argument from free will is going to run into serious problems, because the look how carefully I have to distinguish freedom of intentions from actual free will, which includes capacity to act, which is only bidnillah, by the permission of Allah. And because Allah's the one actually doing anything that actually happens, right? So that's an important distinction to make. And so what people even mean by free will is quite a good way to figure out how they think the world works or things work. It's intimately connected with the concept of cause and effect. And neither this Christian chap or Stephen seems to have appreciated that, unfortunately. And one thing I did note, which was that Stephen gave this: the common modern atheism is a lack of belief. And if you just one sec, take this one, the Encyclopedia of Philosophy, edited by Paul Edwards. It was a very, very well-known reference work from the mid-60s or so. In there, he's very clear that that definition is complete garbage. And the reason it's complete garbage is because if you take it and look over the whole history of atheism, loads of people who are atheists and not atheists and agnostics, it messes up all traditional battle lines. It's literally only there and only adopted in that way, not out of any kind of integrity. It just because it helps make the argument that the other person's burden of proof. Because, you know, if they say, you know, there's not a God, I don't believe in a God, then, you know, they're making if they say there is not a God, they're making a positive claim, just like the one who says there is a God. Whereas if they're saying I lack a belief, it's a way to try and weasel out stuff and give you a dialectical advantage in a debate, and has nothing to do with philosophical validity. And Graham Oppy is quite good at explaining why this kind of spineless weaseling is philosophically invalid, and why he refuses to take such a position and defines atheists and says, you know, put it on the table, you know, say what you actually believe, which is there is no God, right? That's what they actually believe. And the thing is, it actually becomes, under classical logic, it becomes a necessary implication. And if you think about it, if you're acting in such a way as if there is no God, then you don't believe in it, which means you believe it's not true, right? Because ultimately you're evidenced by the way you act and what you take seriously and all this kind of stuff. So it's I see why it happens. Some people, I think, take that definition for not such bad reasons, but mostly where it comes from and why it's popular is just weaselly advantage in a particular kind of dynamic of debates.
Yeah, true. And sometimes the intention is not to address the argument, but really just to debate the argument.
But also, it scooped up a huge bunch of people who said, I'm agnostic, I don't know, and people with humility and whatever. All of a sudden, by a rebranding, they became atheists, and atheism grew rapidly according to various sort of tick box exercises and so on. And say, oh yeah, I suppose I am atheist because I don't
and
really
it's just jumping on the bandwagon now because everybody's doing that. You're just an atheist because now it's popular. All right, let's see the last one. And
you see, we reason on a regular basis. We understand abstract ideas. If we were products of blind, chance, random processes over multiplied millions of years, reasoning and the laws of reasoning simply would have no explanation.
But that's the thing about natural selection, isn't it? It's not blind chance and random. Genetic mutations are random, but the process by which they survive, natural selection, is determined. Being able to understand the dangers that envelop us and consequently make decisions based on that understanding gives us a very obvious advantage that the unconscious process of natural selection would promote. If two ancient humans saw a herd of charging mammoths, and one had the inclination to consider stepping out of their path, then she would have a higher chance of surviving to pass on her genes of having reasoning capacity.
And yet we reason together on a regular basis. From where does reason arise? It's got no naturalistic, atheistic explanation.
It doesn't have an atheistic explanation, agreed, just as it doesn't have a non-stamp collecting explanation. But contrary to Carl's assertion, there is a naturalistic explanation, natural selection, that not only accounts for our successful reasoning capacities, but also our failures, such as has been embodied by Carl here. Anyhow, thank you kindly.
Does natural selection do all that he's claiming that it does? Can it do all that?
Sort of, kind of. One thing I had to pick up on first is he says natural selection is determined. Well, I don't know what definition of determined he's using to make that true. I guess the idea that some kind of selection mechanism happens is a constant, I suppose. But it just becomes
a selection happening without a selected.
Well,
again, how is a selection happening?
This is the thing. The selection process is supposed to be that the better ones live on, and the ones that aren't so good don't reproduce and live on so often, and so on. It's an idea. That can be made to fit sometimes. It's actually nowhere near having a decent level of proof for this idea, because they haven't looked at they literally are in no position to calculate the probabilities at all. So they found plausibility, but they found nothing beyond plausibility. But it seems to be that plausibility is sufficient, and finding lots and lots of points that all make the same plausibility argument 10,000 times over in different locations doesn't strengthen the argument one iota, or shouldn't for a rational person. But for some reason, it's viewed as strengthening the argument, because if it were truly random mutations and the environmental factors and whatever were truly uncorrelated and so on, would you see speciation at the rate that it's been seen? We literally are in no position to calculate that. So anyone claiming it's been proved, no, it's not been ruled out yet. But it's certainly it's not been ruled in particularly well either. But the thing is, it's the only naturalistic explanation, which is why it's been seized upon, and everyone speaks about it as if it's this super highly well proved thing, because there isn't another naturalistic way to talk about it. And we're just saying that Allah's in control of the selection process, and
Yes.
and so we meet all the same data. But it's interesting that the survival of the fittest will start to fall into a lot of problems when you found suicide, not just in humans but in other kind of animals. And then when you find the dynamics of hives and things like this, and actually it becomes okay, not the survival of the fittest, the survival of XYZ different, ultimately optimization criteria, which comes down to if the system is optimizing, which is exactly the prediction of monotheists in the first place. So it's not like they've dug down and found opposite to what theism expects. No, they've found continual additional support that supports the monotheist position just as well as it may support those, if not better. And I think actually supports it a lot better. So yeah,
They've assumed naturalism in their thesis, right?
But the thing is, again, I would actually retitle this video as basically one or two arguments for the existence of God. Almost all of it is actually an argument of chaos coming from order coming from chaos.
Yeah.
So how does order come from chaos? And if it just presented it as that, Stephen would have nothing. None of his responses work. And unless he's answered some deep questions in fundamental physics that no one else has managed to answer yet, then he has nothing. So that would have been a lot more interesting, I guess, if it was presented like that. And again, natural selection just appeals to a system of mechanisms that themselves don't answer the order problem. And the only other thing the video referred to was these moral arguments, which I don't think are that useful anyway for the reasons we went through.
That's been interesting. I've actually found it very interesting going over this video, because I do think these are sound arguments. Not it's not really bad arguments. Maybe put forth very simplistically because of the audiences. But if you want to dig into any of these arguments, you can actually come up with really good syllogisms on why, and that you can actually defend much better than.
One technical correction: technically, they weren't sound arguments because they weren't put together in a way that follows a decent syllogism or something else like that. They were unsound.
But you can do that.
But those areas of argumentation, those positions, can be put forward in a sound way. What underlies those positions can be put together fairly well. Just wasn't the case in that video. But again, I don't know if that's a case of simplification or lack of sophistication.
I do think from the way he was speaking and how he was trying to keep it simple, I do think he's trying to speak to a very broad audience, maybe some young individuals as well as some more advanced individuals as well, right? But definitely an interesting take on this.
Yeah.
So, by the way,
I really need to fill up my water because my throat's dry. I'll be back as soon as possible.
Sure. And I'll do some introductions. Cosmic, how are you doing?
I'm okay, thank you. How about yourself?
I'm doing okay. You were on our stream Sunday, right?
Yeah, and I was told to come here.
Yes, yes, yes. So, I mean, we've been going into the arguments. Did you find it useful? On
Yeah, I
what?
mean,
Yeah.
there's plausible, strong arguments that you propose. I don't see any errors from that paradigm, I would say.
Mhm. All right. So, while Brother Islam is coming back, what I'll do is I'll just go over a few comments that I'd highlighted. So, just for this Khan Finance Academy. So, the answer is yes. I am from Pakistan, from Karachi. Actually, I grew up in Karachi, and but I live in Canada for the last quite a few years. So I haven't been to Pakistan in quite a while. So if you're gonna ask me about something specific there, I wouldn't have some of the answers for you. Right. What else do we have? Cosmic causality. Feel free to jump on and have a conversation with us. Right. Because I'm really interested in this idea of objective morality without the belief in God, right? And I do want to understand how you justify your position. And Cosmic, is this you yourself, by the way?
Are you talking about
It
that
is you.
comment?
Yeah, this comment. This is you, right? Okay.
That comment,
I thought it
that was me.
was someone else. So yeah, we'll have this conversation with you,
So
right?
you want to start with that comment? I mean, I think.
Hello.
Hello.
Let's first do introductions because Cosmic was on our Sunday stream, and we
Oh,
asked
right.
him to jump on today. We did leave him with some sort of homework. Just go take a look at some of the arguments within the Quran why we consider that some of the verses in the Quran refer to physical, biological, or other sort of phenomena which we've only fully understood recently with the advancement of science and technology, right? We didn't know and we couldn't have known early on, right? We were talking about those cosmic, right? But at the same time, there's that particular subject is very broad, right? You can actually go into historical and linguistic and some of the other arguments in there. But
Yeah, there
let's
is
actually,
one subtlety regarding that stuff that I do feel I need to point out because it's often missed. Is the main point for me is that the Quran does not at any point mislead people by what it says about those things, which is not the same thing as being a textbook which derives or informs you, if that makes sense. Because it's got to be such that whatever the known science is at the time and so on, that they're able to see that it's not misleading. So it doesn't give a complete textbook exposition of of certain things, and there is certain ambiguity, but there's so many of these things that not misleading is actually itself quite miraculous. Like if you look at the equivalents in other religions, they become untenable.
not just religions, even scientific texts or
Yeah.
sorry,
Well, I
historical
mean,
texts.
those are also belief systems. I think if we level the playing field by calling them all belief systems, yeah.
Hello again.
All right. So yeah, your internet cut out. Sorry.
I think
How much
so.
did you get?
Couldn't hear anything, but I couldn't get my voice to send it or something. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know if I just interrupted. So
no, I can hear you.
So
crack on.
What the brother was saying, I would actually say just have a look at it again, or if you want to just quickly summarize what you said, Brother Islam, because I think
you
you
can
missed
cover it from the live stream. That's all right.
Yeah, no worries. So Cosmic, your comment here. You can have an objective morality without belief in God, right?
Yeah.
Can you advise us how you come to this conclusion?
So I'm gonna caveat this because you might interpret this because you're a theist that I'm trying to say that you can have objective morality without God. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you can have objective morality without believing in a God. Does that distinction make sense?
Yes. So, let me just play it back in a different way and see. You tell me if I understood correctly. So, what you're saying is objective morality can exist whether or not this person and this person can process and understand somehow objective morality without them having a belief in God, which is not the same thing as them saying that objective morality can exist without there being a God. Is that right? Or have I got something wrong?
Cosmic, did we lose you again? He had this problem with his internet on Sunday as well, if I remember correctly. Let's just wait. So we do have free naturalists. Free naturalists, feel free to jump on. We would love to have that conversation with you, because the idea of where do
I
you?
think I cut out again for just
Oh,
a
I think he's
minute.
back. You're back, Cosmic.
You're back.
Did you hear what
Great.
I said?
Yeah, I was here. I was beginning to hear your explanation because you were rewording it, but then I cut out, I believe.
Yeah. Are you
Okay.
using Wi-Fi or are you on your phone internet?
Phone internet, I think.
Do you, are you able to? Yeah, please, because if this continues happening, it would be almost impossible to have a conversation with you.
Let's try. Let's try.
Yeah.
Let's see if it makes a difference.
Please. Please do so. While I just bring this up, what Free Naturalist was saying, because I found this. I think this is a very interesting discussion to have, right? Where do we say we don't know and it is actually a right position to hold, whereas in what circumstances is this position untenable or unjustifiable?
I think it's good because there's something fundamentally true about it.
Yeah.
Right. In that, that we always don't know if no means in the most absolute sense possible, as in we never. So it's easier to express from an Islamic viewpoint, ironically. So we never know as well as Allah knows.
Yeah.
So whatever would be your naturalist or atheist way of expressing that, I would agree, right? But I think for me, whether or not you think you know anything or something, should make you look inside yourself and think about why you think you know something, including the statement that the most honest thing to do is to say we don't know. Right? How do you know that? So for me, what it becomes is a check on your hypocrisy and an ability to eliminate it, because you act as if you know things and you speak as if you know things all the time, right? If you genuinely took this view of we know nothing, I know nothing, you've never crossed a bridge because you don't know if it's going to fall down and so on and so forth. Like, you behave as if you know things well enough. And so what it brings to the fore is really not, in the human brain, there's not so much of a binary, yes or no, although people are often forced into binaries for various reasons. It's about degrees of belief. And this goes very well with the Bayesian analysis. And this is why I think Bayesian analysis is particularly useful and should be used a lot more in philosophical arguments and so on, because you're talking about what's your degree of belief in these statements. And if you do that, then I think rather than saying admitting we don't know, we just adjust the parameter values for our degrees of belief in various things. But we can't set them arbitrarily, because there's logical relationships, and so shifting the slider on one proposition would change the resulting beliefs that you can have in another, and so on. All right, we got you again, Cosmic.
So hopefully I don't get those issues again. But But yeah, that comment I like to say because oftentimes I get pushback and I don't think I should. So this is something that I like to put
Okay,
out
so
there.
can we just check I've understood then? So you were
Sure.
saying that belief. Sorry, you're saying that your belief in objective morality is not contingent on believing in a God. It's not the same thing as belief in objective morality. Sorry, belief
God
in objective morality without the existence of a God at all. Is that it?
That's correct. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So because I often see people saying you can't have objective morality if you don't believe in God, which I don't think that's right.
Well, here's what's really interesting. We need to dig into what it means to have an. What does having mean? As in, does it mean that an objective morality exists out there somewhere, or does it mean that you're actually in possession of it, in that you know what it is?
I would say you are in possession of it. Yeah.
That's interesting. So in possession of it. And the other question would be, so that I'm very interested to dig in how that works, because I don't feel that anyone other than the God could be in full possession, and if you're in partial possession, it becomes difficult for me to process what it really means. But the other, what was the other part I wanted to pull up on? Sorry, can you just fitra? Oh yeah, so fitra was one of the things I wanted to address. But sorry, you put the comment up on last time. There was something else I wanted to pull up on.
All right.
So
Let
it
me
does
bring
mean
it
in
up.
possession. And the other is, what do you mean by God when you say without any God?
I would say like a supernatural entity, probably.
A supernatural entity. Okay, so we have a bit of a problem with supernatural entity, as in, do we mean the same thing? Because, for example, would you regard angels and demons as being supernatural?
They would be outside of the natural world, so that would be a supernatural entity, sure. But we don't understand those to be gods. So I see your distinction there. Yeah.
Well, the reason I say that
And-
is because in Islam, they are considered part of the natural order, and they're not supernatural at all.
Yeah.
So we may have a difference in meaning of supernatural. Makes it difficult to use to
There's
define
also
God.
another thing. There's also another thing I would like to add, Brother Sam. Would
Mhm.
you consider Vishnu or Zeus as supernatural?
If they're true, then yes. But if they're false, then no.
Okay. So Zeus, Poseidon, Vishnu, Shiva, Isis, Osiris, or any of those, you would, if you considered them to exist, you would consider them as supernatural, right?
That would make sense. Yeah. And if they don't exist, then they're just a false, just imaginary, aren't they? So.
Okay, and just for the sake of checking where the box is, what about Superman and what about Batman?
Obviously they're true in the sense of like they're like a societal accepted character, like a fictional character. But
not
true?
regarding the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, rather like,
Are they
is
natural?
in their law, is that is that supernatural or not supernatural?
Yeah, I think we would regard that as a natural law. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think I understand how you're using the term. But we use.
I'm less so interested in how I define the terms. I'm willing to adopt how you would use the terms. I don't have an issue with that.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
This is exactly what we're trying to
understand. We need to understand where you are, though, right? So I first of all, say the God rather than a God, and that because that was actually a big penny drop moment for me when I came from atheism to Islam in the first place. Is the very notion of one God among many possible choices is really begging the question in a very subtle way. But the God or not the God is actually quite a different framework or framing of things. And so here we're going to run into a bit of difficulty, because our definition of the God includes all of his names and attributes, and they are inseparable. You can't build him out of parts or think of him as made of parts. To do so would be to make a logical error. So being the judge and origin and source of objective morality is inextricable from the concept of the God that we use. So it leaves the interesting conundrum is, how do we have this discussion? Because technically, if we translate your sentence into Islamic worldview, it's just false by definition, and that's it. But that wouldn't be very fair or useful. And so, and like you said, with good intentions and so on, you'd like to adopt our definition, but to do so, you just say, okay, so I'm wrong. When that doesn't seem like it's going to be that productive. So I am not sure how we're going to proceed. What would you like to do?
Maybe let me suggest something, because this might be useful. So Cosmic,
Okay, can we
here's
just
how
check if
we
Cosmic's still there? And did you hear that?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
I can
Go on.
respond.
he's on his Wi-Fi now, right, Cosmic?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So hopefully we won't come across the same issue again. So Cosmic, the way we understand God is the transcendental being who is all powerful, all knowing, and he's the one who created the universe. He's the one who's in eternal existence, the necessary existence, right? He's the one who is above all other existences, right? There's none
Self-sufficient. And
self-sufficient. There's none more powerful than him. There's nothing more than him, nothing above him. In the sense, not in the sense of physically above him or anything, but essentially, you cannot conceive of anything greater than him, right?
yeah, and he
And
encompasses
whatever
everything.
you can conceive
Encompasses
of,
him and someone.
yeah, and whatever you can conceive of, that this is how powerful he might be, he's greater than that, right? So that's essentially how we see him. So we don't see him as that he can have a god. He is the God, right? He cannot have a god. Anything that else that you can think of, right? Even if, let's say, Zeus existed, he would be a creation of God Almighty. He wouldn't be a god. Even if Vishnu existed, he would be a creation. I'm not saying they exist, but in our paradigm, they're just his creation, period.
Yes, and
Right?
if
So
taken as
that's
a
how
god,
we
they would
see.
be, yeah, and if taken as a god, they would be false gods rather than not a god,
Yes.
which is an interesting distinction, because there are some things that are just not gods, and they're not treated as gods.
Yeah.
There are some things that are falsely treated as gods, and we call those false gods. And then there's the only one true God, which is interesting
Exactly.
because in the Islamic paradigm, which matches up with the Abrahamic line, going back to Judaism, humans can take themselves as God, whereas in Islam would say that the human has taken a false God. But in most naturalist perspectives, for example, they wouldn't accept that they've taken themselves as a god. But if they define morality to be on topic, then they would have taken themselves as a god by definition on our system of definitions.
I think another just
Before we pile, we've
clarification.
said a lot of stuff, and Cosmic's just.
Yeah,
I don't know if he's keeping notes because there's
wanna make
tons of
sure.
stuff to respond to. Let's let him respond.
Yeah.
I'm listening, and I follow what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
okay.
so remember that the first time we use God, the God, where it's the capital G, right? Where we're referring to a specific existence, right? The second time we're using God is a small g, and what we're talking about is whatever the object of worship is, right? It's not the capital G God that we're saying specifically. It is the small g God so to speaking, if we're using the English phraseology or the equivalence, right? The Arabic word for the second one is ilah, right? The first
Mhm.
one is Allah, right? We make that distinction. Arabic, it's very clear when we use that, but in English, we're just trying to make sure that you grasp the difference in meaning, because you can take anything as a god. It could be Zeus, it could be Sachin Tendulkar, it could be you yourself, it could be Taylor Swift, or anything essentially, right? That exists. It could be a rock, it could be the universe, right? You get the idea. Or it could be the true God. We Muslims believe that the only one, the only existence that should be worshipped and that is worthy of being worshipped is the one true God, right? So it's that's the concept that we come at it with.
Mm.
I think your concept follows. I think the only place you lost me really was when you said that angels and demons, these are natural
Oh,
entities.
okay.
So
Yeah,
what
sure.
that would
Let
postulate to me is that, well, are you saying that they're also testable under natural experiments too? Like, are they? Can they
Well,
be? Can we subject them? Can we find out the force of angels, or an angel particle or something like?
I mean, angels are made of light, nur, right?
So
So,
you're talking about photons? You're saying photons? Angels are
here's an
photons?
interesting question, because Arabic uses the word nur, and so that encompasses or includes the thing that we've isolated, which is the electromagnetic spectrum, which since the 1920s, or well, since 1905, really, it's been pretty well agreed is made of these things called photons. But these again depend on the perspective you take to look at it. But it doesn't necessarily follow that angels are made of photons. There could be something else that's Allah counts as light, which is not mappable to a photon field, for example.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
so the way to think of it is, so for example, an angel, Jibril, came to Muhammad ﷺ and shook him and spoke to him. So those are very, yes, interactions that, had there been other measurement devices or recording devices other than Muhammad's present, then they would have interacted or detected or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's not the
And
same as saying, can we test it? In that, can
yeah,
we come up with some way to probe or push or see or these things or so on? Because the way we think of it really is, we think of the seen and the unseen, which is really more the manifest and the hidden. So if Allah's hidden something from us, there's nothing we can do to expose it. It's only by him, by his will or his decree, that it can be exposed. And this goes for everything. Like, the same is true of photons and electrons and things like this, and the same is true of anything. Like, and yeah, jinns have appeared to people, and for some reason they appear much less now, although they do seem to appear in other places. But would we be able to construct an apparatus that would force them to manifest, or create some kind of statistical model where we can analyze the amount of order and chaos that's going on in human interactions and determine that somehow there must be some non-human interlocutor or interactor there? I mean, tough question. Basically, if Allah wills, he can create such a method or such an experimental tool and make us aware of it. But I'm not aware of any, and it doesn't make sense to me that there would be one necessarily.
So
Does
my
that
question would
clarify it at
be,
all?
yeah, that does clarify it, but then my question would be, you mentioned the seen and the unseen. I think that makes sense in the paradigm of you being tested, because if you had all the answers, how is it a test? But then, can we not map the seen and the unseen with directly onto the natural and the supernatural? Because that's how I approached it. See, the seen is the natural and the unseen is the supernatural, because it can't be tested.
Yeah, not really. I mean, so there's a few problems I have with that. So,
Sure.
for example, the contents of Faisal's mind is unseen to me. It's part of what we call al-ghaib, the unseen, because seen and unseen is relative. It's not an absolute. It's not properties that are attached to things.
Okay. I see what you're saying, but then we could try to circumnavigate that by saying the potential to be seen and and no potential to be seen. So we can
No,
categorize
because
it.
angels and jinns, not only do they have potential to be seen, but we believe that every single human being directly interacts with a jinn all the time. I have one, you have one, Faisal has one, and it whispers into us. But a naturalist or many other people have different explanations or models for what's happening. We say
You
that
know,
it's the jinn whispering to us, but you would have a different model for the same phenomena.
to simplify this, Brother Islam, just because this seems to
Well,
be
just before we simplify it, I wanted to see what he thinks about that, because I think that might
yeah.
clarify.
I see personally. I don't see a contradiction there. I think we could have
Mhm.
schizophrenia, but you could have what you call a jinn inducing the schizophrenia, and we just don't understand that. I don't see an issue. I don't see a contradiction there.
Well, so the thing is with what you're calling natural and supernatural, right? And whether or not it's measurable or testable. Can I myself test if I have what we call Korean, the specific jinn attached to me? Yes. Yes, I've done lots of experiments on that daily. I'm very, very strongly convinced from my own internal experiential evidence, but I wouldn't have been able to see and identify it without having the correct theory or sufficient theory to be able to investigate in the first place, which is the same as you would say for photons. So it again actually becomes a bit difficult to make that sort of.
So Cosmic, if your definition of something being natural is what can be experimented on, right? And supernatural
I
being
want to
something which
expand on that.
cannot be.
I'm not talking about currently, because I'm not naive. I understand that with time we can experiment upon more things that we couldn't before. So I'm more interested in what's potential, like what the potential of it being.
In principle, right?
Yeah, in principle.
In
Yeah.
principle, yeah.
That's what I
So
understood.
in principle, if you're calling natural what we can experiment on, in principle, right? Either potential or here, and supernatural as generally speaking what we cannot experiment on, or we cannot devise an experiment and see results for, right? And be conclusive about those results, right? Let's take that as a close approximation of where this distinction is, right? So yes, the hidden world would more or less be something which is which we may not have a direct experiment on to prove that this is going to be the outcome, right? Okay, we don't control the elements of the experiment, so we cannot actually perform the experiments substantially, right? So from that, does that sort of is that acceptable so that we can move on?
Yeah, I think we can expand and build upon that. Sure.
Okay. I think that's good enough coverage to understand each other, and we can see if we bash our heads into some issues later or don't.
So
I did one other curious question. Is gravity?
No, don't go into that yet, because we were on the concept of God. I want to make sure that
I forgot we're going too far from that.
We don't move from there. We don't move from there if because so Cosmic, does this idea of God, does that make sense so far of what we explained, that this is who God is to us? And are you able to understand the concept, or are there any questions with respect to this?
I'm sure there's questions, yeah, but I do accept that it's a coherent paradigm. Yeah, I see an issue within that paradigm. Yeah, why not?
Okay. So for us, we exclude everything else as God other than that one true God. So when we talk about God, we're talking about the one true God only, right? And in our paradigm, there can only be one true God. There's it's impossible for more than one to exist. Does that also make sense, this idea?
I think it would be a contradiction to have
More
more
than
than
one.
one of that entity. Yeah, I don't think it would be
Yes.
coherent.
Yeah.
Okay,
Especially
so
if we
yeah,
think
at least we're
more than one definite article would be a total fail.
yeah. Okay, so yeah, Brother Islam, I just wanted to make sure that that was clear before we can move on. So
So are we
from this
going into
perspective,
gravity now? 'Cause I'd
So
like
should
to
we
go
go
as
back
well, man.
to objective morality, or was there something else you wanted to pivot onto, Cosmic?
no. Let's stay with this
I'm
because
happy to go wherever you take me. I'm a truth seeker, like I imagine you both to be. So we're going to end up in the same place, I would imagine, if there's given enough time, given that we're both, or that we're all sincere. Why not?
Yeah. Although I don't know if we've been given enough time.
That's true. Yeah, that's
Human
fair.
lifespan
I do
actually isn't
I
very
do
long
have an
compared
option.
to the space of mappable ideas, you know.
But I don't know if this is what you believe, but I've been told that if you are sincerely looking for the truth and your time is cut short, well, God would recognize that. And it could be perhaps that you're accepted even without reaching what you call the truth.
I would concur with that, but I would
Yeah.
also attach
Yeah.
Allahu Alam, which means God only knows,
It's
basically.
it's true. We do believe in that God is just. He is the source of justice, right? So if you're someone who was seeking Him and your time came before that, right? Um, who knows? He may actually test you in a certain way to, uh, and that test might uh, be enough for you to enter into paradise, right?
I mean,
So,
I
like
would
I said,
say
He's not
objectively,
gonna.
it's not a very comfortable position though, because like, how do we
Yeah,
like?
but this is also the reason why we recommend once you've become convinced of the truth, do not hesitate, do not linger on with the doubts, right? Just
Yeah.
because the position, once you know that God exists, right? That is, and basically that God has communicated with you, and you've become convinced of this idea that he is involved in my life. He is someone who's given me guidance. You should be accepting the guidance from God, because there's really, when you think about it, Cosmic, if God exists, any knowledge He is imparting to you will be superior to whatever knowledge that you can arrive at using your own understanding. Correct?
Well, I think that's an issue with how you people give your dawah to the non-Muslims, because I think that you try to convince them on the religion of Islam, but if it's
Mhm.
just about the belief in no God except the one true God, then if someone is just convinced on that, then they can become Muslim, right? Even if they reject, even if they're going to continue to eat pork or listen to
Let me
music.
answer this one, Faisal. So, yeah. So
Yeah,
when you
sure.
say can become Muslim, I'll just carefully clarify. So yes and no, in the sense that Muslim is someone who's submitted to God. That's sort of like, you know, linguistic definition. But the way to do that, or to do that without arrogance, to do that, genuinely, you'd have to know what you're submitting to and how to do that properly. And so, if you were living somewhere you had no way to access the Quran or Muslims or something else, it'd be different from this day and time where you are, where you can find that there was Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, which puts you in the awkward position of saying, well, if I testify there is God, but I deny that Muhammad is one of his messengers, then, what's up? Do I really believe in the right God or not? Or am I?
Yeah, that would just be a straight up hypocrite. I understand
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
right. So it becomes challenging to genuinely have the position that you were speaking about. But one thing I did want to say is I actually agree with you about a lot of the way Dawah is done. I think the most fundamental thing is belief in the God, and it comes, and most of that is trying to explain or impart and clarify this concept. And anyone trying to convince actually has a serious problem with their own Islamic beliefs, with their own deen, because it's really important to us that and it's in the Quran, that only Allah can turn the hearts. So we can't convince you, and you can't even choose it for yourself. It's a gift from God you can ask for, and our duty ends at clarifying, and we should never see our duty as convincing, as that's way overstepping the bounds.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like, for example, if I was to tell you, can you stop believing in a God for 5 seconds? I don't think it's something that you would even be able to do because you believe it's true to your core, right? So you can't even entertain that possibility of just eliminating that for 5 seconds. And I
That's
think the
an
same,
interesting question, or interesting point.
and I think the opposite
I
is true also. So I can't pretend that you wouldn't be able to pretend that there is a
I'm not
God.
quite sure. I use the concept of virtual machines to explain this. Are you familiar with virtual machines and computers?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay, cool.
vaguely, not in depth, but sure, yeah.
Yeah, because because I used to be full-on atheist. I was raised that way, very hardcore version, naturalist, very anti-religious, and so on. And I really had no good working concept of God, except for a whole bunch of straw men, all the things they hated and rejected, and so on. And I was studying theoretical physics, and one of my peers was a Muslim, and so when we were first discussing this, it didn't take long to realize that I literally could not compute his concept of God and his worldview and so on. So I had to basically build a virtual machine in my head, that can kind of run his view. And it started off being really crap, and eventually became a reasonably good VM where I could run his view reasonably well, and the better it ran, the better I could understand it, and the more plausible and everything else it was, and so on. And I feel like I'm still quite good at putting on the hat of atheist, in terms of being able to steel man the positions and being able, sort of put myself back in the frame of reference of where I was. But you're right in that it's not the same as actually being back where I was. You can't flip the entire brain state, but something about the brain, there is a degree to which we can hold a virtual machine sort of thing that's kind of good enough. And for me, the question is always, is it good enough for the purpose of discussion or consideration?
I completely agree with what you said. I don't use virtual machines. I say exactly the same thing, but I just use the word model. I think I built my life on models, and as I get older, I try to refine my model or even completely rewrite my model if it doesn't fit.
Okay. So for me, that's slightly different, because for me, there's two things. In my virtual machine analogy, the models would be the programs that run
Sure.
on the operating systems.
Yeah,
And so
I see what
the
you're saying.
machine, that middle layer, is something different. It's a way of thinking, which is different from the actual model that then runs on the way of thinking.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, because like it's a completely different operating system. It's not even compatible in that system. You have to make a new system to run it.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think there's a lot of accuracy and a lot of truth to extract out of that.
Just something I want to add. I want to say here, Sarlak, I saw you in the back chat. If you want to jump back on, I'll be bringing you up in about 15 minutes. And just so everybody knows, we'll stay for around an hour. I'm going to see if Ali can jump on or Fawad can jump on and continue, if possible, with Brother Islam, right?
I'll need
because I have to go.
leave at a similar time as you anyway.
Okay, then it's fine. So we're going to be wrapping up in an hour or so. So Cosmic, while we're waiting, if Sarlak comes back, we'll have a shorter discussion, but otherwise we'll continue with you. A question I would ask you is this concept of God that we actually define to you, that this is who God is. How much does that make sense to you? Do you think that is a God or an a definition of God that you can say makes sense, and you can ascribe to that this, if that is who God is, that is someone that you can say is worthy of worship.
Yeah, that is worthy of worship. Definitely, yeah.
So for you, it
Definitely,
boils down
right?
to a question of if exists.
That's right,
If
yeah.
true. Right.
And
So
and
can I?
and I wouldn't even go if. For me, if it's beyond a plausible doubt, then I think the nature of risk benefit I would believe, but I don't need absolute certainty because I don't think it can be attained.
That's more. That's a more mature position than I had when I first started looking at Islam. That's something I had to learn along my journey. Interesting. So, can you give an example of something that you believe is true, and there's a good method for determining it's true?
Sure, I would say I believe close to 100% that the Earth orbits the sun, and
Okay.
I built that model upon the vast amount of evidence that is to support that theory from different avenues of knowledge.
Here's an interesting test. Did you actually build it on the evidence itself, or did you build it based on testimony from scientists and other groups as to what the evidence is?
I think I built it upon many different things, and then I would say as I went through life, my certainty on the slider went up and down for different reasons, and I would say now I'm at a place where it's not just from testimony, it's from actual understanding.
No, wait. So, but I mean, understanding the testimony someone's given is different. I guess if I put it another way, is have you done your own direct experimentation, computation, that sort of stuff? And so
Not for every
you're
evidence, but I've done a couple experiments. Sure, why not?
okay, cool. I mean, do you have a background in physics or astronomy or
Yeah,
anything, or
I did
computer science
physics for
stuff?
3 years at university,
Oh,
and
perfect.
physics and astronomy.
Oh, good stuff. So yeah, so you have done some direct
Yeah,
experiments. Yeah, it's good.
exactly. Direct observations. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good. It gives a good basis for us to be able to distinguish, between evidence that you've directly gained and analyzed yourself versus,
Yeah, I
evidence
think it's
from
important because
testimony of other
there's a
people.
lot of appeal to authority within people who follow science. They're not doing people who do science. They're not doing much of the science that they use themselves. Really, it's like less than
Mm.
1% probably. So yeah, I'm aware of what you're trying to get at.
So how do you solve the problem, particularly if you're looking at a lot of astronomical observations and so on, where the observation itself presupposes a theory, right? I mean, it's very difficult to think of observations that don't presuppose a theory.
Yeah, true. How do I get around it?
Just how do you deal with? I mean, I don't think you can get around it. It's more like how do you
That
deal with
goes
it
back
in
to
your
what I'm saying.
reasoning? Right?
How do I deal with it? I would say I understand the biases that come out of it and how they could be misleading, but ultimately that is insignificant. It's an insignificant doubt compared to the certainty it provides.
Right. Okay. Yeah. But it's interesting because if you take, for example, the DESI probe and the baryon acoustic oscillations being measured to try and look at.
I know the DESI probe, yeah, but I don't know about the baryonic probe that you just mentioned there. I don't know about that.
Oh no, the BAOs, the circular patterns in the sky that are supposed to be leftovers from the Big Bang, that we can sort
Yeah,
of we should
the
be able to tell
remnants of it, yeah.
yeah, we should be able to tell the distance that a galaxy is away, if it maps based on the size of these BAOs.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's one example of, I think, where in the one hand you have like a very clear observation, and the other hand, the whole observation basically depends upon a lot of theory, which is tied in to the question that you're trying to ask.
Yeah.
And so I guess the one way of looking at this from Islamic perspective that is going to be interesting to talk about, one of the guys commented before about the fitra. Have you heard of the concept of the fitra?
I think you call it the innate disposition to believe in something.
Almost. It's a little more than that. That's a consequence of the innate disposition. So the fitra is basically the part, if you like, that does not get altered or corrupted.
So would you surmise it with like a constant?
It's I think so. I mean, yeah. There's a sense in which its characteristics are immutable.
Sure. Okay.
If that's good enough. And basically, it's we can get corrupted in lots of ways, but the fitra itself doesn't get corrupted. It can get covered, and just our view of it be distorted, and so on. So when someone says like a baby is born on fitra, basically they don't have other corrupting influences yet. They're aligned. We start off aligned in this way. And then all the various influences over time somehow deviate you from it. So you can kind of think of this in an analogy with astronomical observation. We can look at this question of sort of examining your fitra, and you're sort of building a mental telescope to look at your fitra. And that we would say that if you get clarity, you will then not see God, but it would become clear to you that God exists, because your fitra would become clear to you.
Yeah, and that would be your eureka moment, your epiphany onto that would give you the drive to want to convert, I would imagine.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting you say that.
Yeah, I think.
For
I
me,
think
I had I had a very difficult time accepting it. I didn't have a drive. I felt like I was driven or pushed to convert. I didn't have a choice. So yeah, in a sense, that's a drive too. But I just felt compelled by the by the belief in it. But in every other sense, I was sort of drag kicking and screaming.
I love the way Cosmic is thinking. So I would like to make it simple and direct, right? So Cosmic, when we talk about this, going back to the idea, the concept of God that we talked about, right? At this point in time, where do you stand? Do you think that God exists by necessity, or do you think that God do you need some proof for that God to exist? Where do you stand?
Oh, I would always err on the side of needing proof. I think is a good way to go about your life.
Okay.
When he said by necessity, I mean, are you familiar with the Kalam arguments or arguments from contingency, that sort of thing?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah. Are you familiar with
Yes, we
the
can.
arguments from contingency?
Yeah, I think it's a very solid argument. I think it's a good one.
So I think this is what he meant by exists by necessity.
Yeah, but so if I was to give pushback onto it, I would say there's a little bit of a jump from going to the uncaused cause, and I think there's a little bit of a jump Muslims make from going from determining the uncaused cause to saying that the uncaused cause is the one true God. I think there's a jump there.
Yeah,
Because
this is fascinating. I like. Oh, go on. Sorry, I thought you finished. Say the because.
Yeah, because obviously at the very beginning you said that this one true God has attributes that are inseparable. So yes, you use one attribute to connect it, but then you can't just bring in all the other attributes at the same time with that contingency argument, I would say.
Yeah. So this is this is really interesting to me on a number of levels. One is, so this argument, the version you've just given is really the William Lane Craig version.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
But Kalam's original version, the
Ibn
words,
Sina's, I think.
no, it's Kalam.
The Kalam cosmological. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yes.
Also
Sorry, that's
commented on it later,
Ghazali's.
but yeah.
Yeah.
But Imam Ghazali and his Confusion of the Philosophers is which the book I've got down there.
Is the Kalam also connected to the Islamic use of the Kalam? Like, is that where it's derived from?
Yeah. Well, so Kalam was a philosopher. So, but we don't have his actual original work. We know that it exists because of the other later philosophers that commented on it. One of the most famous being Imam al-Ghazali. And the reason I find it fascinating, so first of all,
just to interject really quickly, so
okay.
you're saying this was an Islamic conjecture or postulation?
Yes, it originated from the Islamic worldview.
Right. Okay.
But
That's cool.
I will clarify more on whether or not it is actually Islamic. This is where Al-Ghazali comes in, which is fascinating. So first of all, Kalam used the word, I believe he's likely to have used the word, we don't know for certain, but you use the word suburb, which is, remember in Arabic, it's not perfect translation. And so cause and reason are kind of inseparable in that. And so he didn't need to, in the way he was arguing, differentiate between a sort of temporal succession of causes versus, which is normally what it's taken to mean, versus a chain of contingencies.
I see. Yeah.
Both were covered, whereas in the modern philosophical landscape, they're split apart as two very distinct arguments with distinct analyses. So that's point number one. Point number two, which is really interesting, is when you follow through his logic chain, the end of it becomes essentially, if you express it in Arabic, then it becomes one of the names of Allah, which is the result. And so for them in that framework, it's therefore Allah, because all of those are referenced to him. So it wasn't written as a way to, or even in a mental framework or landscape where you prove each of his attributes separately. And to do so would have been quite blasphemous because they can't be separated. It's so the argument just puts together a pointer to one of his names.
So essentially,
Yeah,
Cosmic,
okay.
what the book is talking about.
But I can grant you that. That's
Yeah, go
I have no
ahead.
issue with that it connects to one of the names, one of the definitions that you attribute. Yeah, that's fine.
But I think just to make sure that we work with Cosmic on his understanding, right? So Cosmic, you agree to the idea that a necessary existence must exist. You just have a question. You just question why it has to be the God, right?
Sure. Yeah. The God that you want me to believe in. Yeah.
Okay. Now I want you to think really hard about this very idea, because how did we define the God, right? The one that we would worship.
How did you define it? I think it was
Cosmic.
the only one worthy of worship.
Remember, we talked about how the highest existence that is possible, the most powerful, the all-knowing, the all-powerful, the all-knowing, right? The one who is all these superlative transcendental properties were being attached to this very existence, and we're saying every other existence is subservient to it, right?
Yeah. But if I understand correctly,
Cosmic?
what Cosmic...
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, he's there. If I understand correctly, what Cosmic's trying to say is that this argument or these arguments from contingency don't lead to the implication of all of the names and attributes And so for him, it could be
Mhm.
some other
Yeah, I know.
entity as some subset of those names and attributes. So this is why I wanted to sort of figure out, if you like. So do you actually, let's define terms first. How do you define will and intention and capacity to act? The relationship between those?
How do I define those?
Yeah,
You
so
asking for definitions of will.
so for me, I say that will is the ability to construct intentions and to act on those intentions. So it includes capacity to act. So intentions is independent of capacity to act. So if you have free will, you have free intention and free capacity to act, and you have free will within those constraints of what you can intend and what actions you have the capacity to perform.
I would have thought will is the intention, not the capacity. I wouldn't say you need the capacity as long as you have the intention. That's what I would have thought initially.
Okay, that's interesting. Normally, I think it's quite useful to distinguish intention from will. You think of them synonymously?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Okay.
I think without thinking about it deeply, I would say intrinsically, I would.
Yeah, we can try and work with that. Quite often, there's good reasons to distinguish them, but we can work with that for now. Just so I'm aware. So you do believe there's some kind of necessary being. Are there any other attributes or qualities other than being a necessary being that you have arrived at, or that you think are highly plausible?
Is there any other attributes that I think are highly plausible?
Yeah. Of this necessary being.
Or necessary, I would say it isn't. You believe in the everlasting, right? I would say that's necessary.
Yeah, so it's a good example. So what I'm trying to get at is what I'm trying to understand from you is where are you at so far? So you believe that there's a necessary being of some kind or some way somehow, and then for me, being eternal pretty obviously follows immediately from being necessary, and
unchanging also follows.
Unchanging in its defining qualities, but then also obviously supremely powerful. That follows, right?
Yeah, for sure. Because without the power, you wouldn't have the capacity.
Okay, cool. Self-sufficient, so independent of anything else.
Yeah, that obviously follows. Yeah.
Yeah, you're getting very, very close to the Islamic concept of God. I think now when we talk about will and intentions, do you believe that follows or doesn't follow?
A few other things.
From what?
A few other things that we can actually establish before that. Sorry, am I lagging? Just let me know.
Yeah, you are lagging a bit. There are other things we can establish, but I'm not sure we want to go down that route now necessarily.
Okay. I'm just going to rejoin because the concept of knowledge and wisdom was one of the other things which I feel that for it to
later
something to exist,
this order's better,
right? And with intention, those are a few things that I was going to add there.
Yeah, we'll get there to those. So the so intention / will of some kind, do you think it's that follows or is disconnected from the contingency arguments?
I don't see how you get the intention and the will from the contingency argument. I don't know if I'm missing something, perhaps, but I'd love for you to fill me in.
And this is why Imam Ghazali's book is so interesting, because Imam Ghazali's book, which is one of the main ones we know about Kalam's argument from in the first place, actually refutes it. It takes it apart and it says, no, this is a bad argument and it's terrible, because it takes away the freedom that Allah has to not create the world, because he has the choice to have made it or not, right? Because what he was getting at in modern modal logic is, well, hang on a minute, if necessary, if G implies C, where G is God and C is creation, well, if necessary G, then necessary C, which means God didn't have a choice, right?
Yeah, like it's like these series of events had to be this way, and we couldn't
Right.
have it in
So
any other way.
right, so this is why Imam Ghazali hated it and argued against it, which is quite ironic. And I think it's really neat, because if you take that, keep that in one corner of your virtual machine for the moment. Now, are you aware of the modal objection to the argument from contingency?
I've heard about it briefly, but I don't know it in specific detail. So I would
I'll run through it and let me know if it makes sense. You studied physics, you'll be able to get it. That was an in-joke, a physicist, by the way, because it's a mathematics and logic thing, and we poke mathematicians all the time like that. Anyway, so basically what we're saying is, if you have a chain of contingent things, right, so this is contingent and so on and so forth, so you would have in modal logic the diamond operator, right? Could have been another way. And then going all the way back to the necessary being, we have the problem, because if that NB implies C, just like Imam Ghazali said, then actually this is a chain of necessaries, not a chain of contingents, and so you generate a contradiction.
I see. Yeah.
So for me, the only way, and that's not an argument from an ignorance or I can't see another way, but for me, it must follow that the necessary being has the will, where will is as I defined it, with intention and capacity to act. Because only under that circumstance can you have both the necessary being and the chain of contingent things, and everything be logically working out without generating a contradiction.
Yeah, I see what you're getting at. Because, like, for example, like the first thing that came to my head is it's conceivable to me that you could have like the exact same universe created by the God that you suggest, but it's not the humans being tested, it's cats. Like, so, like that shouldn't be eliminated from a possibility. So, but if we believe it's necessary that it had to be this way, then that would cancel that and it would lead to problems. But if you're saying that God willed this to happen, then God could have willed it not to happen. So that solves the problem for me.
Yeah, it's good. So,
and this is something
follow that through in modal logic, it works, which for me means that it is another one of the attributes that you can get from the argument from contingency. But careful, because I'm not using the causality type of contingency. I'm using the self-sufficiency kind of contingency.
Yeah.
Have you ever
and this is something
read?
Just want to add a very small thing here, because I want to relate this to the Quran as well, because the Quran also talks about this idea that God creates whatever He wills, right? It's in He has the capacity, and it is His choice to create, and He doesn't have just us as a creation, this universe as the only creation. He has other creations, right? He has so in our paradigm, cosmic, the idea of a multiverse is not something that we would reject, that, oh, there can be a multiverse. There can be alternate universes. There can be all sorts of different paradigms. But to for us, those are not defeaters for the existence of a God. It's
I
just
thought you did.
in
I thought
our
you did
paradigm, it's just
explicitly
pushing it.
believe in multiverses.
Sorry.
I thought you explicitly did believe in multiverses.
It depends on your definition of
Not,
multiverse.
yeah,
Not
not
the
in the multiverse as in the Marvel,
no,
Marvel,
no,
or
not the Marvel one. Let me take this
what
one for a minute. No, I mean, so if you're thinking of multiverse in terms of like David Deutsch's quantum computing, or the way he sees it, or the way Sean Carroll seems to view it, then that's not the same as the sort of Islamic concepts that match up with multiverse.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. Yeah, the Sean
Okay,
Carroll
but
wouldn't
if you
map
mean
onto Islamic.
multiple different
Yeah, that's what I was getting
universes
at.
that are causally distinct from or disassociated from us, then
Yeah.
yes, correct. We have,
And
have
I
at
thought
least
your
one.
model is that they're built on layers on top of each other, but I'm not too well versed on that.
So they're not necessarily different parts of a multiverse. This is the layers of the heavens. Each one is like a ring inside a desert, and if you were to go in through that ring, you'd be another desert, and inside there's a ring, and so on. And it's interesting that I've always wanted to see if there's some cosmological clues in there, because this ring desert thing happens 7 times, and there's 7 Hawking points, and I haven't been able to get that out of my head for 15 years. But it's probably nothing, but there maybe there's something to find there. I don't know if there, because there is this interesting preferred axis that we're seeing in the CMB, the axis of evil. I wonder if there is some identifiable alignment. Anyway, going a bit off topic, but that stuff's cool to think about.
Yeah, there's a bias there because it's cool. It's intrinsically more attractive.
Right, this is true. But so I mean, what Faisal's raising is an important point, I guess, in that the Islamic view is very, very flexible in many ways, but it is also very rigid and very well defined in other ways. One of the things I found fascinating about it is how the system of definitions and understanding of how he manages things, and the very well specified system of names and attributes and so on, never fell into and are not vulnerable to all of the kind of traps that the Enlightenment era Europeans found themselves tearing apart every variant of Christianity with. It's very, very distinctly, elegantly structured, and has a very interesting balance of where there is flexibility and where there is rigidity or clarity.
I see. Yeah.
So I did want to carry on from where I was reasoning before and ask, have you read or been introduced to Surah Al-Ikhlas?
Yes, yeah, I'm familiar with the translation. Yeah.
Okay, so if we go through the sort of 4 lines of that, so it's Qul huwallahu ahad, say he is the one. So we seem to agree on that bit, right?
Yeah, that's a very easy thing to accept, I think.
Good.
Yeah.
Now, Allahu as-Samad, very, very difficult to translate as-Samad properly, because if you look it up, there's like tons of different
I see a lot of variance in the
elements.
in the translation of that line. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, E.W. Lane's lexicon's quite a good way to look up, because are you familiar with the root system in Arabic?
Not really, no.
So one of the things I'd love for you to have a little dig into and research, I think you'll really find this interesting, I think all mathematicians and physicists should, is the Semitic branch of languages is a whole different trunk from all of the Indo-European languages. Have you read about that before?
No, I've heard it be mentioned, but I've never looked into it.
have a look at it. So the Indo-European language tree is everything, like all of the Indian kind of languages, everything from German to all the weird Nordic stuff through to, you know, English, French, you know, Romance languages, Latin, everything. It's all on that. That's one way of doing language. And the other way of doing language has a few historic languages in it, but the main three are Hebrew, Aramaic, and Arabic. Now, Hebrew is obviously the principal Jewish language. Aramaic was the local language of Jesus, and Arabic, the language of Muhammad. These Semitic languages are built different. They work different. It's a whole different way of doing language, which goes together, I think, with a different way of thinking. But there's also, it has really interesting implications for how a meaning can be kept without corruption or being you can. So I guess what I'm getting at is with a Bible, or with anything someone's written, but take the Bible, for example, you can read it lots of different ways, but there's a lot of sort of personal choice involved in that. It's not, there's no real inbuilt intrinsic check as to whether the way you're reading is correct or not. Whereas in the Semitic languages, so if you're reading the Hebrew Old Testament, if it were correct or preserved, or if you're reading the Arabic Quran, you don't get to say, well, this seems to make sense to me, or, well, this is the, you know, makes sense according to the church. I mean, there's very, very specific linguistics that goes on. And when you talk about the structure and the poetry and stuff, like, the analysis of it isn't necessarily subjective. Like, there's a huge amount of real objective analysis that can be done, because it really is more like an algorithmic specification, more akin to a context-free grammar in a computer language than it is like Indo-European languages. And like, so
I guess this is where you would say, like, maybe I'm wrong, but this is where I would hear that, for example, the verse that you quoted before, the one in that has no room for interpretation to be anything other than one, right?
Yeah, and the way it is, yes, I mean, that's true. I mean, the one, I guess, is quite a bad example because that's pretty clear in most languages. I think what I wanted to get at really with it was the system of roots. So the Semitic languages have, each word has a root, and then there's a specific algorithm that's applied to the root that gives the actual word that's used, everything except in the male past tense, which is usually the root. So you basically take this root, apply some algorithm, get some word, and that's the word you actually say. And then so from the word that's said, you can figure out what the implication is relative to the root. That's sort of how the words are structured.
Okay.
Which is really cool because it means there's, you know, proper analysis is done. But it also means there's a kind of built-in checksum. So often Arabic people aren't going to need to ask as many clarifying questions as to what did you mean by something. But also what it means is that in Indo-European languages, you need basically this evolved dictionary, which requires some degree of common experience and common understanding of, you know, whatever is being referred to. You know, that basically it gets, the meanings of words in dictionary get built up by the history and the culture and so on. Whereas in Arabic, that's not quite the case. Because of the roots.
that shows in the English language, especially, how it just changes every 100 years.
Yeah, whereas the roots don't change. The roots are the same as they always were, and you know, Arabic is to be an Arab actually means you speak Arabic to a native level. So lots of different, you know, people had their own different sort of cultural backgrounds, but we're all
to group them together is like grouping Africa together. It's just a very Western thing. So
right. So, with that all in mind, when you look at a word like as-samad, Qul huwa Allahu ahad, and Allahu as-samad, so with as-samad, you take this root, which is quite well known, but then it's expressed in this particular form where if you try and translate it to English, yeah, he's eternal, so it kind of implies that, but also it's about sustaining things, and it's about being needed by everything, but also not needing anything else and being independent of everything else. So all of those concepts are all baked into that one word in a very concrete way.
Very interesting.
Yeah, so that line is very, very deep in and of itself. And for me, what is stunning really is that these 4 lines and the way they're written refute they don't just refute, but they stand as a quite simple definition. It's not a comprehensive definition, but quite a simple, elegant, and portal almost into understanding God, which is impervious to all of the attacks that European philosophy has developed since the Enlightenment for all other monotheistic concepts. And so when I came to understand this surah, it's only 4 lines long, for me it really started to hit home in a number of ways, because I realized that this in a sense all of the people arguing against monotheism from the European Enlightenment perspective were correct, because they were arguing against false concepts of God. So if
Yeah,
we down
I've seen that mentioned by some Muslims. Like,
Uh-huh.
why you start? That's like when you say like there is no God. That's exactly what the Enlightenment period discovered. There is no God of these false gods that
Yes.
these people are raising up. Yeah.
Yeah. The
So I
false
think
are all wrong.
that's why they say like we're halfway there or something.
Yeah.
I don't know if
And
that's true, but it's a good way to surmise it.
I think it's true. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Allahu Samad, and then I mean within approximation, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
next says Lam Yalid wa Lam Yulad, which I think be interesting to see if this makes sense to you immediately or not. He has never had offspring, nor was he born.
Yeah, so obviously that then it wouldn't be an uncreated. It'd be a created God, which would not fit the
Yes,
attributes.
that would make no sense. But also has never had offspring.
Yeah, isn't that just having a hard no to Christianity? Like, it makes no sense.
It is giving a hard no to Christianity and clearly distinguishing us from, but actually not all Christianity, because
Sure,
remember there's
yeah.
Unitarian Christians.
Yeah,
It's
true.
hard no to Trinitarians, but it's also quite interesting because if something has offspring, it produces something of the same type as is giving birth.
Sure, yeah. Like, say
So,
you can't have a divine entity have an offspring. It wouldn't make
yes,
sense.
because it would violate then the uniqueness.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the last line for me was a real kicker. And at first I'm like, why is that in there? And then I realized, and when it hit me, I started to take Islam very seriously. Because this is walam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad. I noticed this ahad. But there's none comparable to him, or there's none to him any equivalent. Actually, in set theory is probably a better way to translate this Arabic, because in set theory you would say he's necessarily a singleton, essentially. It's never null, there's never more than one, and that's in terms of any kind of comparison set you could make. So therefore, if you have any generic arguments against concepts of gods in general, this line itself, the very fact that this is in the Quran, actually keeps Allah away from those arguments, because basically if part of his definition means there are none other like him, then it is a category error to make an argument against some category you've put him in and say you've argued against him because you've argued against everything in the category and he's in the category, because
Mhm.
you can't
Yeah.
put him in a category without straw manning the actual position. So you have to uniquely argue specifically against the actual concept of Allah that's laid down in Quran and Hadith, or you're not arguing against it at all.
Yeah, yeah. I see the power in that. Yeah, because a lot of
Very
people,
interesting.
a lot of people with emotional arguments to say, well, why doesn't God do it this way and that way? Like, they're non-starters basically.
Mm. Well,
Exactly.
yeah, but even when people think they've got strong rational arguments or whatever, it's what it does is that there's this generic concept of God, which is really a subset of a few of the attributes that Islam holds, and that just becomes a proxy for monotheists in general. And so an atheist, think about the definition of atheist, right? That A applies across everything in the category of theists, which is everything that has any deity. And so how are you defining this thing becomes actually pretty difficult.
Brother Sam, I want to make an observation here, because what you just said about putting him in a category, it reminds me of another thing that Christians do with the term ahad in Hebrew, which is a very similar term to ahad, right? And they basically say that that's a term used not just for individuals, but also for collective nouns, that you're part of a group. Hence, they explain the Trinity from it. So this explanation, because this is verse 4 is an explanation of ahad here again, right? It's going back to this term. So to me, this is so profoundly linking back to what they do and refuting them in that sense, that you cannot even put him in a category and then say, yes, he is part of a category, because he's unique and cannot fit any categories other than his own unique category.
I think this is one of the reasons this struck me so much is because sort of I'd been doing quite a bit of learning up until this point, but when I realized that, hang on a minute, this specific concept is free from all the attacks that work on all the other more generic concepts of God, and that's highly non-trivial. Like, that is not easy to do. It's not actually easy to come up with this proper God concept, as in, like, literally one that is infallible, that keeps working, connects with everything. It's the most simple. On the one hand, it's simple and elegant and very easy to understand and process. On the other hand, it's incredibly deep and complex, and almost unending, or is unending in the ways you can try and understand it. Every argument or position of physics and from biology or whatever, it's all consistent with all that stuff, even though this was defined 1400 years ago. And a system of 99 attributes, where any apparent contradiction is not a real one, right? So, for example, he's the first and he's the last. You don't go, oh, that's a contradiction. It's obviously is pointing at something else there, and so it helps you to understand the concept. That's what they really are. They're doors or pointers to understand it more deeply. But yeah, that whole system is highly non-trivial, extremely advanced, extremely elegant, and extremely powerful when it comes to any kind of philosophical analysis. And then when I turned from trying to critique, from trying to see how it would be used or be useful, like, I wasn't very good at it back then, but I'm much better now, alhamdulillah, about using this practically in my everyday life. And so this isn't like an abstract system of definitions that goes into accepting a religion that's then, leaves that aside and, you now follow the religion. And this abstract set of definitions is a fantastic set of definitions that are directly functionally usable. And in that sense, are kind of testable as long as you're allowed to be an experimental apparatus and you don't require statistical verification with other people's or too many other people's views that you can't communicate with them directly.
I really think there's a lot of beauty in that. So it's akin to me like understanding that energy and mass are connected, like as simple as E is equal to mc squared. It's like condensing this big concept into something very simple to understand. But this is why I don't understand why I see so many Muslims making the weakest arguments, trying to prove the religion through scientific miracles. Like, how could he have known this? And look at this sign. I think they're all incredibly weak arguments. Why not go to the root of the argument?
I
It
think
depends on the person.
yeah.
It's a very subjective piece because, Cosmic, I'll be honest with you. Some people have just accepted Islam when they read the second chapter, second line. That's it. That was enough for them. And I'll just to give you an idea about what I'm talking about, right? This is what the second line of the second chapter says, right? So the second chapter, let's go to the first one. The first one is just 3 letters, Alif, Lam, Mim, right? Okay, so this is not spoken, but this is just sort of, you just elucidate the words Alif, Lam, Mim. It's like saying A, B, C, right? The second
ALM.
verse, yes, exactly. So the second verse says, this is the book, there is no doubt about it, a guide for those mindful of Allah. I read about this one individual who said, who writes this way? And that was enough. This line was enough for him to say that this has to be from God, right? So this is a very subjective, at the end of the day, the evidence is there for anyone to go take a look and basically form their conclusions. And I'll be honest with you, Cosmic, if you're being sincere, and if you look at the Quran independently, right, there's enough proof within the Quran. Sometimes sometimes you'll be asking the question, why should I believe in this? Or why does this make sense? And the next verse sometimes you read, or the next page that you turn to gives you the answer. Those are at times, go ahead, brother Sam.
I was going to say, but with a heavy caveat, because indeed sometimes you have these thoughts and then you turn the page and you get this hunch and think, wow, that's somehow unlocked part of my brain, and I can see my fitra better in the Islamic view that we're talking about, clearing the skies for your telescope, the internal telescope. But also have to be clear that it's only actually the Quran in the original Arabic, and that's very important that the translations are all rough approximations, because it can't be you can't necessarily do the kind of philosophical dissection you might be tempted to do on just the English.
Yeah, sure. But like you're saying, it's a completely different method of language, so you're gonna have massive loss in translation, I imagine.
Which means read definitely. So let me just take something quickly. So which means definitely read it and read from it and so on. But talk to Muslims about what you think it means, whether you have a positive or
I don't like doing that.
Negative or questioning.
Sorry? I don't like doing that. I don't like talking to Muslims to explain verses. Because my view is that if the religion is true, then I would much rather see what the classical scholarship said about the verses. Because
I mean, if you talk to a knowledgeable, well-behaved Muslim, then they should be telling you what the classical scholars. I mean, The problem is, because I have like a
I think people read into it at times disingenuously.
sometimes
I
they
have
might, they couldn't
caveat
do it disingenuously. But I think the reason I'm saying this is, so I have Tafsir Ibn Kathir, for example. It's one of the classical scholars for
It's
explaining the
popular
Quran,
one, yeah.
and I have it in English, but it was also written in Arabic, and it
Yeah,
has
sure.
exactly the same problem. And I remember going to my tafsir and thinking I've learned and understood something about how to interpret the Quran. I spoke to one of my friends who's native Arab speaker, and he started laughing at a whole bunch of stuff, and he thought it was kind of hilarious because he could see the problem wasn't the translation, and the problem, was fine. It was just me. Like, I couldn't see how there's multiple ways of reading in and around things. So it's I would advise, the reason I say talk to a Muslim, but yeah, make sure they're not trying to twist things, make sure they're very, very genuine and that they are knowledgeable, is actually because you can have the dynamic exchange. Is it more like this or more like that? And do look out for, are they going back to the linguistics? Are they pulling in appropriate evidences? Are they show you cross references with other parts of the Quran? Or are they saying my
Exactly,
shaykh taught
references
me,
are
I'm sure?
important.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
if they're doing it right, it's just very, very useful way to interact and engage, and you'll be able to see if they're doing it right because they'll be doing this
The
cross reference.
reason I mention that is because I do have a big issue with how the Muslims reconcile universal common ancestry or common ancestry with apes and their religious beliefs. And I see some Muslims try to say that that humans are evolved from are an evolved organism, just like natural selection would suggest, right? But then I don't think that's a classical view. So I think they're just trying to read into the scripture to reconcile it. So that's why I don't normally go to Muslims.
That's a very, very interesting discussion. I'd love to have. We've only got 7 minutes into it. We don't have long to go into it
have to go
properly.
in 7 minutes. I have to
Yeah.
go in 7 minutes, Cosmic. But you're welcome next Tuesday as well. And like I said,
Right.
in these the Tuesday streams, we would basically give a lot more time and a lot more. We can go a lot more in depth into the topics that we're discussing, right? And at the same time, what we would like to do is, as you've seen, we try to make sure that we're understanding you, where you're coming from, and you're understanding us fully. So we take time in understanding your position as well as in making sure you understand our position
I
as
think
well,
it's a lot
right?
harder when someone's not sincere. But yeah, when people are
Yeah.
sincere, I think it naturally happens. Sure.
Yeah, and we've had a very natural conversation so far.
Yeah,
So
I think so.
without question. Yeah, so one thing I would say here, right? Take this back. You seem like someone who would gain a lot from just reading the translation itself without getting into the Arabic, without getting into the details. Yes, there is, if you want to understand the full miracle of the Quran, you do have to go into the Arabic, because sometimes it's not just about the fact of what it means, but it's about the delivery itself, how it's actually written down, and the words that are used, the perfection of the language itself, that at times is very unique in the Quran, right? And one of the other things I actually I forgot, I just want to add this, right? I do agree with you on that you should go to the classical scholarship for the interpretation. However, unlike some of the other books, the Quran is actually a living communication with humanity from God. And we do believe that there are certain things in it that, as human beings progress in their understanding of the reality around them, right, they are going to unearth more from the Quran, that this is how things are. And our understanding is, our understanding of reality is going to supplement or help us understand better what has been communicated to us in the Quran. What
Interesting.
this Yeah,
It's
it's
important,
like
actually,
that.
and I need to point out something again, because physics background,
Yes.
you'll appreciate this, and this is logically consistent because the Quran specifically tells you to go look at what's called his signs. The word for signs is ayat, which is the same word that's used for each verse. Each line that you read in the Quran
Yeah.
is an
So
ayat.
this is an ayah.
So he says,
Each one of
look at, let me just, in the last few minutes. So he says, look at my signs. And so those signs are not just the ones in the Quran. There's also explicitly tells you to look in the rest of the world outside, and that we're supposed to go and seek that knowledge and use that to check our understanding. And we're never supposed to be in a position where any human being can understand everything that can be understood from the Quran. It's a book of unlimited depth. That's the way we understand it to be. So in a sense, you can almost think of it more like a portal or something that helps
is Cosmic
potentially
still
unlock
there?
the mind.
Brother Sam, I think he dropped off. Is Cosmic? Are you still there?
I'm back.
Oh,
I dropped for a couple
Peter.
seconds.
Okay.
It's okay.
Oh, he dropped and came back.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, sorry, Akhi. Do finish up. So did you get the idea of what it means by signs or the ayahs in the Quran? What the brother was explaining?
Yes. Yeah. I think
How
that's
much of that did you catch? And
Yeah.
okay,
I got it.
so
Yeah. So the reason that's important is
okay,
because we're supposed to look at is the what much later became understood as the Book of God and the Book of Nature was originally, and very cleanly from the Islamic view, it's his signs that he makes manifest, which is this word stuff that's seen, versus the stuff that he's kept hidden, which is this unseen stuff we were talking about. Remember, we're at the beginning when we're talking about mapping to supernatural.
I would just to satisfy my curiosity, because you mentioned it and it's something of interest of mine. Why, when you wanted to mention gravity, where were you going to go? I know you don't have time, but where were you going to go with that as a brief, introduction to?
you're opening a can of worms.
Have to join next week, weren't you? You'll just have to come back.
Oh, you're teasing me. Okay.
No,
Yes,
I very, very quickly, actually, I was just going to say that see what I can get in 1 minute. It was just about whether or not the law itself is supernatural, because we can only actually do experiments on things affected by gravity, right? So what then do you say of the law itself? Where does the law start and materials stop? Like, how does that work for you? Because I wanted to get that bit.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
You probably don't have long enough to respond, but we can definitely geek out about gravity next week. That'll be cool.
Okay.
Well, that was a very productive conversation. I learned a lot. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, it's been a real pleasure. If all callers were like you, this would be a much better experience on average.
I wish
and
more theists were like you too. I get very weird labels sometimes.
so it depends on the stream, which stream you jump on of ours. In some of them, you will find us more combative, right? This one is specifically so we can have these type of dialogues, right? But we can be combative, and we do have some of those streams as well. This Sunday one normally is combative because we get it. You need to understand that we get a lot of people who are coming here for debates. They're not coming here for a sort of a conversation like you have, right?
I avoid those. I don't like combative. I don't like debates. I like conversations.
It feels like when I join, I'm coming up. I'm on a chopping block, and they're trying to defeat me. But I'm not trying to fight back.
It happens. It happens sometimes. So just sort of whenever you go up, just make sure that you are very clear that this is where you're coming from. And sometimes you sort of disarm the person when they have this sort of, okay, the next person coming in is gonna just continue where the last one left off.
Should be able to react to it. If you say that I'm interested in discussion and things I'm not interested in, right? They should be able to react to it. However, an analogy would be like, when people are on those shooting ranges and they've got to shoot the bad guy and avoid shooting the good guy, right? Yeah, they miss sometimes, or they trick up. So yeah, or they
And
don't
we
see
get
it.
we get some really weird people, Cosmic. You wouldn't actually just appreciate that. So
Mm.
we do appreciate when someone like you comes up. We have a conversation. I mean, we're hopeful that you will take this from us, gain an understanding of Islam, and maybe hopefully you'd find that this is actually the right way. This is the truth. You'll find the truth within it, right? And if nothing else, at least you've gone wiser. You've left us wiser. You've understood Islam. You know that, okay, we're not the kind of people that, oh, everybody's portraying us as, right, in the media or around. Reasonable people, we hold a worldview that is consistent and that is reasonable. It has a basis for morality and everything else. It's holistic as well. So just leaving with that understanding, for us, this is a win.
Yeah.
Honestly, I would really commend you on one thing that I think you do really especially well is just the quick semantics that you do. So, something I avoid with the Christians because it just goes on forever. But I think the way you tackle semantics, I think is productive.
Oh, alhamdulillah. Yeah, it
Yes,
needs a
thank
balance. It needs to clarify terms, but not endlessly. I dropped my email. So before you go, if you want to grab that, you can message me. And for you as well, because you had physics, we can also just chat physics
Oh, but
independently
where am I seeing your email? Where is it?
in the private chat.
In the
in
private
the
chat.
back
Okay.
end. Oh, he probably rejoined, so he might have lost it. Do you want to just put
Oh,
that
I
in
see.
again?
Yeah, if you put it in again, then I'll catch it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let's check if you can see it.
Yeah, I got it now. I see it now. Thank you.
Nice.
Okay,
It should be,
so
if it's well spelled,
right.
Coach and Faith at pm.me. Yeah, cool. So, but with
Yeah,
most people,
and
I just keep it to talking about Islam, but we can talk about physics as well. These books are all maths and physics books, so we can geek out.
Oh,
yeah.
brilliant. Okay.
And I'm also leaving the email for our channel. You can also email there if you want to come on, if you want to arrange some discussions privately, or if you think that you want to have a more detailed discussion on something, we can have that as well. So the channel email is there. The brother's email is also there. So
Did
feel
you
free
change
to
your name
reach out.
when you converted, or were you called Islam?
Yeah, I actually have 3 names. The one I was given at birth, the one I was given at adoption, and the one I took when I came to Islam.
Oh, brilliant.
So it's a trinity, but not a holy one.
But it's not a requirement, just so you know, Cosmic. It's
Yeah.
not a requirement for you to change your name, right? The reason why you will change your name is if your name is a very paganistic name. So for example, if your name is the son of Zeus or something along those lines, right? Or it translates into something
Or like a
yeah,
Hindu name, like one
or
of
a
their
Hindu
deities.
name as well. Yes, yes. You would
Well, yeah.
you
If it
would
was a
avoid,
deity name,
yeah.
I
yeah.
can
Right.
imagine
There's
if you
a little
wanted
bit
to
of no
revert,
bad
you'd want to
names.
change it anyway. So
Yeah, but yeah, you don't have to. But I did want to, and actually, there's another interesting subplot to this name as opposed to my original choice of name that I changed
Oh,
it to.
5 more minutes, Akhi. I can do 5 more
Go on.
minutes.
No, you
and
gotta
then
go.
we have to
You gotta go. I've gotta go. Let's do it because we'll talk next week, inshallah.
Yeah. So Cosmic, welcome back next week. All right. And we can continue from where we've left off. Thanks
no
for
problem.
jumping on today. All right.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right. I think that was a good discussion, and he does. He's very open to ideas and open to that discussion. So alhamdulillah, may Allah guide him. Okay.
Inshallah. I mean, this is the thing. He's so much more advanced in a philosophical sense than I was when I first started looking at Islam.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know how long it is since he left uni, but anyway, yeah.
All right. And
But also, when you
before
say
we go,
advanced, I mean it literally has in a lot along the roadmap. Like it's so
mature.
similar to where I was.
I think
No,
the word
I
you're
don't
looking
just
for
mean
is mature.
mature more generically. I mean specifically, if you look at my conversion roadmap,
Oh,
It's
okay.
like he's a good chunk along where my roadmap
Oh,
was. But I've
okay.
held pretty much exactly the positions that he had, more or less, although he holds them in a more mature and softer way than I had, because I was pretty militant.
Hmm.
But yeah.
All right. So just a reminder for everyone, rihatul-arab.com. If you're looking for fragrances, our good brother Yamani, help him out. He has a baby coming on the way, mashallah. Make dua for him. It's easy for him and his wife. And help him out with this. He's going to need it. Right?
And it's good stuff, apparently.
Yes.
He's
Yes.
definitely a good
And
brother,
then,
and I trust his stuff.
and then if you use the discount code DOTS15, you will get 15% off. So take that opportunity. All right. Okay. With this, I would just say, Jazakallah khair, everyone, for joining us. Do remember our brothers and sisters in your prayers. Do not forget what has happened. Do not forget this. Do not forget it. Right? We cannot forget the pain and suffering of our brothers and sisters. With this, I would say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.